So, welcome, everyone. Welcome, all raiders from Hannah. Welcome, raiders from Cheshire Cat. Thank you so much for the raids. Welcome to the second episode of a show called The Rebuttal that Evan Fonzie and I have started, where nothing is made up and the points still don't matter, however. Um, and this is a debate panel that will have professional moderation, we'll have live fact checking, we'll have a $35, yes, $35 reward, US dollars, in any shape or form to the person who wins Best Debater. And what is the best debater, might you ask? The best debater is the person today that crafts their argument with the most well supported sources. That's, doesn't have to get called out by our beautiful illumination every 10 seconds. And has a extremely well crafted discourse throughout the whole debate. So $35 is on the line, everyone. And the topic for today, you know, I will let my co-host Evan Fonzie introduce, but it's a heavy topic, and I just want to reiterate, everyone, please be respectful in chat, as well as all the debaters. Please be respectful. I'll turn this over to my co-host Evan Fonzie, who will explain the topic. Will explain the rules. Okay.
Great. Yeah. So again, this can be a very personal topic, can be very serious. So yeah, I put in the name of my stream, and I think Doc did as well, a little trigger warning, because this can be serious for some people. We're gonna be discussing physician assisted suicide, and I think the first half of the debate we're gonna discuss the morality of it and debate around that topic. And the second half will be more in the science, kind of legal side of it. If I have that, I think I have that about right. So a couple of rules, because we're gonna be enforcing these because we want to. And I don't think we even have to say these. We vetted these people, and everyone in this debate is smart, respectful person. I don't think we're even gonna have any issues. But I think it's important to say, even just for the chat and everybody watching, to know that we're gonna have professional moderation, and we want this to be an insightful discussion, but also one that is productive and doesn't get any kind of feelings hurt or anything like that. So obviously, rule number one: no hate speech of any kind, and that goes for racism, transphobia, homophobia. Any kind of hate speech is not going to be tolerated whatsoever. Two is just be respectful. Like I said, this is a serious topic, and it deserves that kind of respect. So we don't need kind of, yeah, you get what I'm saying. Three is try to keep the argument based in fact. Obviously, anecdotal stories will come up and things like that are totally fine, but if you start to get too out there, we might call you out. Also, try not to talk over each other. Obviously, like we said, we're going to try to have good moderation on here. It's not about who yells the loudest. It's about who has the most concise and good points. So yeah, try to talk over each other. And if you are going into a personal anecdote that you think can be somewhat triggering for whatever reason, try to use trigger warnings and content warnings just to be respectful of people's understanding. I think I pretty much got everything there, right, Doc? Anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you covered everything. Riverboat Jack, how is it now that you have just now followed me, you horrible friend? I'm just kidding.
I got around to it eventually.
Yeah, no, that covers everything.
Yeah, I want to touch actually on one other thing briefly. Well, just because although this is the topic of physician-assisted suicide, this can be misconstrued or misinterpreted. And when we're talking about suicide, if you are feeling suicidal, thinking about hurting yourself, or concerned that someone you maybe know is in danger of hurting themselves, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. It's available 24 hours a day. We just want to say that up front and kind of throw that disclaimer out there. This is something we take seriously, and we want this to be a informed debate. So,
but yeah, if no one has anything, if no one has any questions, everything sounds good.
The $35 will be paid in Bitcoin,
Yeah.
right, Doc?
I don't even have any Bitcoin. Okay.
I do have one question. Is there a like formal structure to the debate? Are we going to do like intro and then point 1, point 2, point 3? Like,
we're gonna start out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doc, but we're gonna go down the line. Everyone's gonna introduce themselves, Then we'll go back around one more time and let everybody have a chance to kind of give a sentence or two on their take, which the first question, like we said, is going to be about the morality. And then it's going to be a little bit wherever. And I recommend raising your hand if you have a point while someone's talking, and we'll make sure to include you to speak next. And if you get mentioned, obviously we'll say, hey, we'll give you a chance to respond. But it's going to be pretty open forum, and just like we said, just don't talk over each other. Try to be respectful. Feel free to add on to that if you have anything, Doc.
Yeah, we debated having it like extremely academic level, but we felt like it would have been just like too tedious for everyone to prepare for, as well as really tedious to moderate. And it went really well the first time we tried this, so we'll just keep doing it this way.
Yeah. Oh, and if you don't know Lumination in the bottom right here, at least on my screen, Lumination will be chiming in occasionally with some fact checks.
Lumination is our live professional fact checker.
Yeah, and Doc and I do a little bit on the side as well if needed, but Lumination might chime in at any moment. So, feel free, say whatever you want, but if it's a little out of whack, we might call you out.
Yeah, and do I pay Illumination? Yes, I do not have him locked in the basement under duress, live fact checking to the end of his days. Okay, but before we get started, before we get started, we'll just have everyone shout each other out. Let's start with you, Angel Rider.
Hey, thank you. Yes, this is actually I'm popping my Twitch debate cherry here, just saying here. So yes, my name is Angel Rider. I'm gonna be soon and planning on doing a show on Twitch. I'm probably gonna be like a variety streamer, but I have done streaming in the past. Once in a while, I do join up with a group on YouTube called The Breakfast Club, and it's a group of people that I've known for quite a long time in the atheist humanist space. I actually, right as in my day job, I am an online English as a second language teacher, and I've been doing that for about 7 years, and my students are based in South Korea. And I'm also here from the great state of Michigan.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Great. I guess Riverboat Jack, you go next.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jack. I stream here on Twitch about socialism and lefty shit and news, and I talk about all kinds of great stuff, how to make the world a better place, decommodification, worker co-ops, yada, yada, yada. And, I am a freelance writer, and I write about all kinds of stuff, mostly video games and tech, and, are we saying what our position is here?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. No. Oh, yeah.
I'll keep you all in suspense.
Lord Frightuse.
All right, I'm indeed Lord Friteuse. I'm an video game artist with a master degree in video game development. Not gonna be very relevant, but I majored in biology in high school. I'm generally a curious individual, and I'm also self-described as a socialist with anarchist leanings. Due to all that, I'm gonna argue mostly from the point of functionality and utilitarianism of the proposed subject.
Sebs.
Hi, my name is Sebs. I stream here on Twitch. I don't really have a schedule, but I love to talk about basically overall media, socialism, lefty shit. And I'm a sucker for films, so I always try to give a Marxist perspective on different films and shows and all of that stuff. But also because I'm from Peru, every Sunday I cover Peruvian news and Peruvian stuff. So yeah.
Great. Sansol?
Hi, yeah, I'm Sansol. I do Twitch politics. I like to bring everyone along with me for my kind of ideological journey where I try and figure out what I'm learning a lot about different leftist ideologies, but I like to talk to right-wingers as well and try and bring them over or try and understand their positions more. So everyone's welcome in my chat as long as you're not hateful and shitty. And then I do gaming as well. I'm trying to get into gaming on stream. I do occasional music streams, like I will be later tonight with my roommate. Yeah, just kind of chill vibes here on my channel.
Awesome. And Comic Girl?
Hello, I'm Comet Girl. I started streaming about 2 years ago, mostly role play. But I've left the role play uh, community because of a lot of toxic problems. I'm autistic and I am 41 years old, undiagnosed. I'm one of many millions of women that have gone undiagnosed and had to live their lives uh, on the spectrum in a world that doesn't understand that a spectrum even exists. And I will be coming at this from somewhat of a mental health aspect. I know most will be coming from a uncurable disease aspect, but I will definitely be bringing something a little bit different than people might expect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
So
Should
yeah,
we, should we
before we,
shout ourselves out, Doc, or we can do that later? No worries.
yeah, we can do that later. Yeah, before we'll just do that at the end.
Yeah, no
Before
worries.
we get into the debate, this is a very special debate because we will be starting off the debate with a personal anecdote to introduce sort of the discussion from Comic Girl. And I hope this anecdote, not only to the debaters but everyone in the chat reminds all of you of how important this subject is, not only to discuss outside of the space of physicians, which currently, physicians and politicians are the only people that do discuss it, but also how important this subject is to discuss amongst like the American people, right? Not just the American people, but amongst Twitch, right? So, Comic Girl, if you're ready, we're just gonna start with your personal anecdote, and then after Comic Girl's anecdote, we're gonna hear everyone else's points.
Okay, I messaged Doc the other day and just a few sentences on my story. As far as so I'm going to start a little bit about what I've been through. Um, as a child, at about 5 years old, the teachers told my mom to take me to the psychiatrist and get diagnosed with ADHD because the thing to do with hyperactive kids at that point was to drug them up. And so that's what they did, but it didn't always, work. I spent most of my time in the office by myself at school, and you can imagine how much I got teased and all that. I was also uh I don't know if I was non-binary, but I would say I was a girl that looked like a boy. So I got a lot of shit for that. I had an older brother, 6.5 years older, who abused me quite a bit, not sexually, but he did a lot of horrible things to me. And as an autistic child, all these things were happening to me. So you can imagine it was all magnified as well. So at about 10 years old, I remember standing in my kitchen, holding a knife to my chest, asking God why he made me so different. And all I wanted to do was stop existing. And that feeling never left me to this day because of all the shit that I've been through, because of society and the way I am viewed. And because I'm a woman, because I never got the help that I needed to be able to deal with society not being able to deal with me, uh, that leaves you in despair. And you spend your whole life suffering because of it. And that suffering is like a chronic pain. And it might seem just like emotional to people, but that becomes physical. After so many years, it gets to a point where every thought physically hurts you. And I don't think that's a very dignified way to live life. I've been pissed on. I've been spit on. I've had eggs thrown at me numerous occasions. strangers saying things to me, yelling things at me, just driving by. And a lot of that was as a child. And does that sound like a dignified life to you? No. But why should I not then have the choice to at least die with dignity without having to do the same thing that my father did in his 50s, overdosing in the bathroom of a laundromat in Los Angeles because he had cancer and was always in and out of prison, and nobody ever did anything to really get him through life either. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live this way anymore. I really don't. And suicide on this level, people think a lot of times that, you know, somebody's just fed up and they just blow their brains out. No. It is something that has been with you for a long time. It's something that you think about, that you breathe and live every day. And that's what I want to bring here is I want to let people know that yes, we should do everything we can to help people not want to die. But unfortunately, there are circumstances that lead people to a place where they have no choice. I'm about to be divorced. I'm getting sent back to America. I'm going to be homeless again. I spent my whole life homeless, going from couch to couch. And now at 40 years old, I have to go back to that life. And for the first time in my life, just a couple weeks ago, I finally was able to get access to antidepressants after years of screaming and yelling and begging for somebody to help me. I don't think that's a very dignified life. And I don't know if going back to America, I'm going to have any access to the help that I need. So what? Am I going to just suffer more until I finally give out? So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Comic Girl.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and you know, everyone in chat, please, everyone, please let's show support for Comic Girl for just being really brave for sharing that story. You know, I think this story at the very least will highlight to everyone who's part of this panel and in our chat just how important this discussion is to have, because a lot of people, you know, share the same stories and share the same background as Comic Girl. So with that in mind, let's start with the first part of the debate. It'll be about the morals behind physician-assisted suicide. Everyone, please, starting with Angel Writer, can you please start by just one or two sentences about your sort of point, about your you know, your side of this argument.
How do you follow up with that? And my heart, I'm almost choking up. I'll be honest with you, Cosmic
I'm
Girl.
sorry.
No,
No,
no, that's okay. That's okay because I'm actually 41 now. I'm gonna be pro, and to hear your story, actually, I feel it. I feel it, my friend. I wish I could give you like a virtual hug or something. I mean,
Oh, you
that's
just did.
how-
Word hug.
I mean, seriously, because that is deep, but it's nice to thank you for sharing that story. I mean, seriously, thank you for sharing that. And as far as my one or two sentences from this, I think this is one of those topics that you can't really talk about it unless you hear a lot from the right to life religious right side. Because second to the issue of abortion, this is another issue that they hammer on. And I know about this because I'm connected to like religious circles. I'll put it out there. I am Catholic, kind of a practicing Catholic, but I'm not more on the right side. I'm more on the left peace and justice side, but it's still a topic that's brought up. So I wouldn't be surprised if this comes up, but that's where I see a lot of it coming from, at least from my perspective.
And what were your argument? Can you solidify sort of your statement a bit more in regards to the like morality of it with the religious background that you have?
Basically, what I hear in the circles is, it's the idea for right to life. Basically, is it's the dignity from birth to death. You're honoring a person. But if you're going to die with assisted suicide, they basically say, well, that's not natural. You should die the natural way, even if you're suffering, even if you're in pain. That's where they come from. And that's what I see on that.
Got it. Thank you. And
No problem.
before Jack, you start Comic Girl. I just like hope you would take the time right now to read through just all this amazing support you're getting in all of our chats.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it all.
Thank you so much, Comic Girl. Really.
Welcome. Just
And
wait, there's more.
Jack, why don't you introduce a few sentences of your point?
So my fundamental position is that I am pro freedom. I'm pro bodily autonomy, even when people might use that autonomy in ways that I would discourage them from using it. I do not think suicide is necessarily a good thing. I just believe that people have the right to do with their lives what they wish. And I would also nitpick slightly about the title of the panel, or our debate panel, mostly because in a lot of the reading I did, it turns out that legally, what we're talking about is distinct from suicide. It's not. We're talking about assisted death or assisted dying, rather than assisted suicide. At least in the places where it's legal, it is not considered suicide.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And
Observation.
Lord, thank you, Jack, for ruining our panel. No, I'm kidding. Jack and I talk about this beforehand. Lord Fright Juice, what about you?
It's going to be complicated for me because I don't intend to argue the morality of physician-assisted suicide. I do believe in bodily autonomy. I believe in decent life, dignified life and dignified death. I have practical objections to it, and especially under a capitalistic system, which I'll be glad to discuss forward. Moreover, my emotional reaction to a person ending their life is better not discussed, especially given Comet Girl's personal history. And I have the mistake, and I don't intend to share them because they're dumb. However, I know that it is important to be that this thing be debated. One of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett, resorted to physician-assisted suicide because he had Alzheimer's and didn't want to see himself go. His mind was his pride, and therefore he didn't want to go through the process of becoming senile and seeing himself die. So it's a sentiment with which I resonate.
Thank you, Lord Fartus. And Sebs.
Basically, even though I would say that personally I'm for it. I came into this panel to argue against it, and I'm also, I think, coming from a very pragmatic point of view, and also with kind of how we don't really have autonomy under capitalism. And also, I wanted to bring up the mental health aspect of it. So Comic Girl also reminded me that the first thing I wanted to bring in this panel was a mental health perspective. So yeah, that's also a topic I wanted to talk about. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Sebs and Sansol.
Yeah, so I believe that fundamentally, like the real conversation about physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia or whatever terminology we attach to it does come down to mostly philosophy and what our morals are and what the moral grounding we put things in are. I agree with everything that Jack said. I believe that bodily autonomy is the big meme here. I think that we need to assign more or give bodily autonomy a much bigger role in healthcare, and informed consent in that regard is very important to this discussion. So I'll be arguing in the affirmative for um, physician assisted suicide. There are statistics to back it up. But at the end of the day, as long as there are no negative consequences that come about as a result of these policies, I see no harm in them. Um, you know, there's nothing that really, no argument that I've been presented with in in this topic that really pushes me away from it.
Thank you, Sansol and Comic Girl.
What was the question?
Oh, so we're
Oh, I'm
starting
also
the.
ADD. That's real.
Oh,
I space out.
yeah, no, it's okay. So we're starting the first part of the debate, which is more focused on the morality behind physician-assisted suicide. Which obviously we've heard your anecdote, and we probably know your point by now. But if you could just condense it down to like just a few sentences and reiterate it, if that's okay.
My body, my mind, my decision.
Thank you. So
Bullet
if
points.
anyone, yeah, well, yeah. So if anyone has anything to say on anyone's points that have been introduced, uh, now's your time. Let's talk.
Well, I am really interested in the points about utility and capitalism kind of undermining autonomy. I would love to hear more about those 2 points in particular.
And Lord Fractures?
Well, I have um, a direct answer to that is that so the point has been made that we lost someone, didn't we?
So
Yeah, Sansol. We'll keep an eye. We'll get him back in here once he comes back.
Um, in the presentation, someone has stated that patients are often milked to death with medical care. The hospitals trying to maintain them alive as long as possible to basically drain their finances. I see the opposite problem with physician-assisted suicide, which is to say, during a long, grueling illness, some patients will accumulate debt, and oftentimes, like there's been reports that a significant portion of the U.S. population has declined to receive care in fear of accumulating debt. For some numbers, almost a third of working Americans currently have some kind of medical debt, and about 28% of those have an outstanding balance owed of $10,000 or more on their bill. When asked if they've ever defaulted on those bills, about 54% of people with medical debt said they had, according to a new survey fielded by Salary Finance of over 2,700 US adults working at companies with that. Oh, I just stumbled over myself. Point is, you can end your life with substantial debt, and a lot of people will refuse to be taken care of because they they will lose everything they've accumulated in their life and will leave nothing to their family. Oftentimes, this same family will have to help them to fund their medical bills. And a lot of people will choose death over this. A lot of people will even be pressured by their family to go through physician-assisted suicide rather than occur all this money troubles. And it is my concern that without universal healthcare, without a powerful government governmental agency that would be able to fund the care of long-time illnesses, people will more often than not choose to end their life rather than put their loved one in financial trouble. And therefore, I doubt that this policy of physician-assisted suicide can be implemented if there is no universal health care put together first.
I guess my response to that is, but it already has been implemented. It's legal in, I believe, 7 or 8 states in the United States.
Fair enough.
And I totally am like sympathize with the points you brought up, like especially like the capital, the medical debts, because those are a huge problem in the United States. And I also kind of jumped to the conclusion, or like made an assumption that people who were suffering from medical debt might be more prone to taking advantage of like an assisted suicide or assisted death program. But the data that I found when I was looking through that didn't really seem to back it up. In fact, it seems more affluent and more educated people tend to be the ones taking advantage of these programs, at least in Oregon, or which we have data going back like 20 years.
I wanted to add to the point that Lord Friedrichs made and put an example of a woman in California that basically she had cancer and she was basically presented with either go with a chemo that her insurance wasn't going to cover and it was going to be thousands of dollars, or just decide to get um, the medical assisted suicide, and it was going to only cost $2. And in that position, I'm like, where's really your free will under capitalism? Because like, how can you really live with all that debt when you're not going to be able to maybe even afford your your housing or your food or etc. And even when you only have $2, like she can only pay $2, so she will die. Like, her decision, it will not necessarily be that she wants to die, but where's their options? Like, she doesn't really have any options in that case. And that's also another problem with uh, the system in place, that we don't have any resources available for people who are not uh, who will, like, because we don't have these resources in place available for people, like they are not able to make like actual choices. And because they can't do these choices, like, where's their autonomy, where's their choice, where's their dignity? And also I wanted to add that, yeah, it's been researched that, like, data shows that these people that normally take this decision are normally white and privileged and like educated. And also that also speaks about how basically the system in place, it's very still racist, still classist, still with a lot of biases against minorities. Yeah.
And Fright you, since Seb spoke more so in direct support of you, would you be able to have a response to specifically what Jack addressed as well as what Seb's addressed?
Um, uh, well, if the like the data does not back up my point, I'm fine with it. It seems, however, at least 1 in 4 Americans have to refuse medical care. So I guess my point is not so much that people are going through physician-assisted suicide that they are letting themselves die, which doesn't really pertain to the conversation. But yeah, I would agree that if only affluent people go through this process, it doesn't make very much sense for me to bring it up. I will happily concede.
We
Nice,
still
man.
appreciate that. I think the statistic is relevant, and I honestly think, in my opinion, Seb's used it in a good way to kind of prove his argument. So I think it's definitely relevant. I wouldn't say like it wasn't. I think it was good that you brought it up. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but we still appreciate any kind of factual cited sources brought up. So that's great.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, go on, Jack.
I was just gonna say, like, it's definitely a concern about how capitalism impacts autonomy, right? But it's also like you could bring that up for almost any medical question, right? You could bring that up for like a broken leg, or a sprained ankle, or any kind of like maybe subtly ignorable thing. The only difference being that when it comes to a terminal illness, you can't really ignore it, or when it comes to severe mental anguish, which is what usually is putting people in that position, or like essentially the threat of them losing their autonomy. That seems to consistently be one of the highest like posted reasons for people to undergo this. It's I guess I'm struggling to see how this would affect why that would be a concern just for this instance and not in all medical cases. In which case, how could you possibly give like consent to any other medical procedure, right? Would that not also be coerced?
So, Jack, you're basically saying that that one of the biggest reasons people choose physician-assisted suicide is because of a loss of autonomy, a loss of not just in capitalism but in mental faculties as well. So that's your driving point, correct?
Yeah, it comes down to three persistent things. It's loss of autonomy, decreasing ability to participate in activities that they enjoy, and also a loss of dignity. People cared about that. 87% for loss of autonomy, 90% for being unable to enjoy activities, and 72% for loss of dignity.
And you're citing very well health.
I'm citing data provided by the state of Oregon under their Death with Dignity law that passed in 1998.
All right, so I pulled up something from Very Well Health, which cites that one plus many others from other states where this is legal. You were right before. 7 to 8 do indeed have physician-assisted suicide, with I believe Montana sitting as the lone culprit that has specific guidelines, where California, Oregon, Michigan, Washington, New Jersey, Maine, I believe New Hampshire or Vermont. I don't have the map up in front of me. I'm pulling that all from my head. They all have fully legal. You don't have to go through any realms of it. You just have to qualify with a terminal diagnosis. So I'm just trying to clear all these sites up right now.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Illumination. So yeah, if anyone wants to speak up while someone else is talking, I'd just like to reiterate, just raise your hand so we know that you have a point to make or you have something to say. Besides Comic Girl, since you don't have a mic, feel free to just jump in whenever you want.
Yeah,
You have that special power.
I'll mostly do boop beep.
That works. Perhaps Angel Rider, if we want to bring you into the discussion, maybe you can give a little bit more of the religious perspective on what's been said so far.
Hold on here, just a moment. Let's see here. Oh.
Angel Rider,
you just muted yourself back.
Hold on.
We hear you.
Oh, you're muted again.
You're muted again.
Now you're unmuted.
There you go.
There you
That's
Yeah,
it.
it's acting funky on my side, so I sympathize with Sansol right now on this.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, guys. By the way.
No, no.
You know, yeah. So what is it that you want to know from the religious perspective? What questions do you have?
Well, just as far as what they brought up is when it comes to bodily autonomy, and as far as with different medical debt and things like that, and I know you kind of mentioned it in your opening statement. Maybe you can expand on that a bit.
How can I work?
I'll just be damned.
That is one
Well-
religious perspective.
Well,
That's
kind
true.
yeah, well, sort of on that. Actually, as we're talking about this, one story that comes to mind. Did anybody ever remember the story or heard the story of Terry Schiavo?
Yes. I
Okay,
remember.
if you're familiar with that one, there was a lot of religious kind of connection to it, and one of them was this infamous Catholic priest named Father Frank Provone, or however it's put. And he's a hardcore right to lifer. And we're talking about privilege and all that. It was interesting how that played out because I believe she was brain dead. And the arguments was some members of the family were saying, oh, she's still alive, she's still alive. Oh no, she's brain dead. No, she doesn't have a right to life. I mean, this tore the family apart. And it was such a sad story that it's like, how can you play this out? I couldn't believe how this was just played out in public. But the religious right would come in and they used it as their platform to say, see, this is why you shouldn't have assisted suicide. She's still living. She's still this human person. She is, she's one of, they say she's one of God's creations. They go that, go to that aspect. She's one of God's gifts. I mean, it just kept going on and on and on and on. And it just got totally messy. But yeah, they're into they don't like anything that's not natural, that's not God's work, that's not God's way, quote unquote. And I say that in quotes because that's how they word it, basically. I don't totally agree with that. I'm more on I'm the type of person, I'm more on the type of, this is something that you choose to do. If you can do it legally, if you can do it safely, if this is the option, and that's your choice, that's okay. I think that's good. But when I hear the religious argument that it's because of, if you do this, or like you say, go to damned, or you're gonna go to hell if you do it the unnatural way. Because there's some that go off the deep end of it, and it drives me nuts. Actually, it really does. Because I don't know how to word it quite succinctly. I hope I'm making sense. Like I said, I'm the noob here, so you can help me.
No, that's fine. I'm wondering, and this is kind of. Did you actually have something to say, Lord Freechus? I know you raised your hand at one point. Did you have something to respond with that?
No, I just wanted to have the cliff notes of the case because I have no idea what she's talking about. But
All right,
okay.
so
Yeah.
those cliff notes are
for
sitting
it.
in the debate sources and discussion part channel. All fact checking and everything I do is put into there, so you guys can check it out. If you guys need to step away for a second, you can also put that information in there. But the Terry Schiavo case was basically a case that started in. I remember this vividly. I was in high school.
Yeah,
and
me
it was a
too.
big case. It was about, and I grew up Baptist. We talked about it a lot. So, my wife just chimed in with something inappropriate. I'm gonna move on. So basically, what the case entours is that it was a right to die legal case in the United States, and it started in 1998 and resolved in 2005 with the death of Teresa Marie Terry Schiavo. Basically, the husband was taking care of a declining wife, and the case was taken through the district courts, and I believe it was denied by the Supreme Court, and the pro-life movements, the disability groups, they all fought over this issue. In the end, it was the husband's right to choose, because she noted that he be put down on the documents to choose whether DNR was to take place or not. And a lot of people were still injuncting it. There was a lot of kerfuffle. So there's the wiki page on it. It is very, very good, this particular wiki page.
Yeah. So, like, on that note, I think that this conversation does follow along similar lines, right? like we need to ask ourselves a couple like fundamental questions, right? Like, are there patients? Are there times in which death may be beneficial to a patient? Like my position is, yeah, I mean the benefit of death, you know, as far as we know, is pretty unknowable to medicine. You know, and since it is unknown, we got to work with the known. And what we do know is that suffering, there are kinds of suffering that only end with death. And we make transactional decisions about life every day through small actions and through large medical decisions. And I don't see why death should be treated differently than, say, like a decision about like whether or not you want your leg amputated. You know,
I
you
mean,
you can have
also,
gangrene in your leg and be like, no, I don't want it amputated, and let it kill you. You have
I
that
mean,
right.
it's also if you are able to make that decision, because the reality is that at least in the US, the healthcare system is basically shit,
Oh
and
yeah.
Mhm.
and it's like, yeah, you may need your leg amputated, but most people are not going to be able to afford that. And it's also a discussion about should only the privileged people be able to make these kinds of decisions, and it falls again under where's the autonomy, where's the decision making, where's the choice in people. Like
Hmm.
everybody should be able to make these kinds of decisions. And also, for example, I might go off in a different place, so it's okay if we
Yeah.
don't go back there. But it's also about consent and constant consent. And for example, how it works, or how it worked at least in Oregon, is that you had to ask for the physician assisted death, suicide, and then you had to wait 15 days to ask for it again for them to be like sure that the patient was actually making the decision. And also there were other 2 or 3 that they had to be 6 months uh, from death. And I'm sorry, I'm not blinking right now, but basically it's about that. What if the patient at the last moment didn't decide? And also, there's an argument I saw in Washington law that it was written that uh, the patient only had to basically like ingest the pills, but also if someone were to make them ingest, take them, or give them without their consent, it wouldn't count as homicide. So there are like many like little these kinds of instances that are like holes in the law that, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's all about how the system fucks everything up, and we shouldn't take the risk of making this like an actual permissible law. Or at least, I mean, there are obviously some cases that I think there should be, because there are always exceptions. But also, it's more also. Sorry, I'm going through topics. It's also about like having access to mental health. Um, and for example, I also read about the elderly and how depression also plays a major factor in their decisions of taking this procedure. And it's like if they were able to go to therapy, if we didn't have this stigma on mental health and all this stuff, like would they be actually willing to make these decisions? And that's also another role that capitalism, I think, plays in all this, that how the system has made us like think in certain ways, and all this stuff. So yeah.
Can I chime in right after that?
Yeah, of course. You can. You have the power to chime in whenever you want.
Okay, so this guy brought up a really, really good point about let me touch on the elderly and depression. It's not just the elderly that gets that depressed, but let's go ahead and stick with the elderly. So he's right in the way, as you know, these people, they get older, they don't have anything in their lives anymore, they can't do anything anymore. They're so lonely, they're so depressed, and so this starts this. That's the suffering that I had kind of mentioned, touched on before. And yes, I agree that if there is quality health care in the mental aspect for people, then yeah, less people would want to die. Absolutely. You know, if it comes from, you know, getting them help when they're younger to getting them help when they're older. Yes, I totally agree with that. But what about the instances where they don't have access to mental health? What do they do? You know what I mean? Do they just sit there and suffer until they finally give out? Or they try to kill themselves and then end up mutilating themselves in horrible ways and having to live with even more suffering because they didn't succeed in actually killing themselves? Those are good questions. Okay, your turn.
That's terrible. Yeah. My feeling is, again, I think we should prioritize systems that allow people to be treated physically and mentally. As for the problem with depression, like, I'm very depressed and anxious. There's no day that passes that I don't think I should end my. So sorry, I should have prefaced with trigger warning. I'm sorry, everyone. Anyway, however, one of my concerns would have been, like, if I put myself in the shoes of someone who would object to suicide assisted by physician, would be, well, what if you have the, like, young people who are often depressed and want to end their days that way? Wouldn't that be a problem? And what I found was that, like, in half the time, the time between suicidal ideation and the act takes less than an hour. So, and um, it peters out, and there's a 30% block that is between 1 day and 12 months. So my point here is, if someone actually wants to end their life, just put them through a 4 month, well, couple month program that would assess if they are really in such a bad situation that their situation warrants that procedure. And you would, I think, weed out people who are just, are in a fleeting situation that don't actually mean to end their days. Would be, I think, the safe way to proceed.
So a lot of good points have been raised. I think one of the more compelling ones is just like, yeah, we need the surrounding support, right? Like, we absolutely need like a Medicare for all style system. We need, systems that ensure mental health care for everyone. But Comic Girl raises a really good point in that we don't currently live in that society, right? Like, we don't live in that world yet. And while we should be constantly pushing for it, there are some people who either physically or mentally are in a state of perpetual anguish and know that they're going to die soon. Whether that death is from like a terminal cancer diagnosis or from something else. And you could argue, well, maybe it would be better if they, forced on, soldiered through, and like, maybe there's going to be a cure, you never know. But ultimately, I guess I just fall down onto the position of, if somebody doesn't want to like make a heroic struggle through incalculable amounts of pain, through increasing indignities, through losing the ability to just enjoy anything, I think that, there is a rational argument in there for wanting to, choose when you go and how you go. And I think that that's what these laws help people do.
If I could, I would love to highlight what River just said. So people have been telling me since I was a child, since I was young, and I would tell people that I'm sad. What do they say? Hold on, one more day, take it one day at a time, one more day. Next thing you know, you're 40 years old and you're pretty much running out of one more days, and you look back and you spent your whole life suffering. And all you have to look forward to is more suffering. Why? Because you don't have the access to the things that would take away your suffering. I understand that. That is the fundamental truth. There's no denying that. If we had access to these things, we would not be suffering so much that we want to die. But we do not have that access. Not all of us.
And so,
Yeah, sorry.
oh, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, I obviously I've missed a little bit because Discord is being a little bit wonky, but I do think that the topic of assisted suicide in regards to depression is one of the things that is harder to get across to people. I think that in certain circumstances it is morally justifiable. I don't know if we've already covered that or not, so let me know if I'm going on to already covered ground here.
Nope.
But
no, you're not. Feel free.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So a lot of the time people talk about terminal illnesses and the immense physical pain that they're undergoing. I think that there is room to talk about assisted suicide in regards to extreme mental anguish. I think that the bar for receiving this as a
Uh-oh.
Whoops.
Sunfall.
Oh no.
We lost them.
No.
Doctor, bring him back to life.
To the point that he had before he got cut off, does anyone have any comments in regards to that? Angel Rider, we haven't heard from you in a bit. Lord Fright Juice or Sebs as well.
I just wanted to clarify that I brought up the depression in the elderly because, like, most cases in the physician-assisted suicide are typically on older people, so it wasn't to like dismiss, like, of course, like everyone can suffer from mental health, and yeah. So.
That is a fair point because I know my grandmother, like she was complaining to a doctor that she was feeling tired, but the doctor would just say, "Well, you're old." Luckily, she took a second advice, second opinion, yeah, and turned out she had type 2 diabetes, and there's sometimes some, well, and I'm
Uh-oh.
We're just
No.
They're
dropping
dropping.
What's going
I think-
on?
I think something's up with Discord because I did talk to Sonsol kind of off, in text chat, and someone in his chat said that Discord is running into issues. So I think it might be something like that where the servers just aren't running great. So
Also,
Yeah, that happens.
Do
do
should
you want
we,
me to?
Oh, go
Do
on.
you want me to bring something up real quick? Because I'm like making notes while we're talking.
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
Can I? Before that, I did originally want to come back to Terry Schiavo. If I can do that real
Yeah,
quick.
absolutely.
Yeah, Jack, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, do it.
So, like, if we accept that there are some circumstances in which death is like beneficial, right? Then, like, what what meaningful distinction do we make between like assisted dying and like something like withholding life support or withdrawing life support, right? What is the meaningful distinction between those two things? Because we're fine with withdrawing or withholding life support when someone has a living will, right? When for some reason we respect people's autonomy to die in one regard when they've written it in advance, but not in like, you know, when they're saying in the moment, hey, I would like to die, please, with dignity.
All right, so I don't want to squash on this real quick.
Mhm.
So there are legal terminologies for what you just said. There are direct legal terminologies. The conversation should be probably directed at how you feel these should be interpreted. But I'm going to find those legal determinations. I'm going to throw them in the fact check.
Can I make the distinction that I was arguing morally? Like, what is the moral difference between
absolutely.
those two
I'm going to get those actual distinctions out so that people can understand them at what the nauseum is, and then they can see your take on top of that.
Okay, thank you.
And somebody who has made that moral decision, I would like to chime in on that one, please.
Yeah, go for it.
My apologies.
It's okay.
My apologies. My computer decided it was a good moment to reboot for no reason.
Oh, it's okay. That happens.
At least it wasn't internet issues.
So to touch on what she just said, so at 22 years old, my mom came down with congestive heart failure when I was about 18, and then she died about 5 years later. And so at 22, my older brother was in prison, and so it came down on me to make the decision whether or not to leave her life support on or off. And so I knew that she didn't want to stay on life support. She had told me that. And yes, it's a decision I have to live with because I made that decision. But I stand by that decision because otherwise she would have just sat there as a vegetable for who knows how long. And I know that she was some kind of conscious because when I was holding her hand saying goodbye, she was squeezing my hand. She knew I was there and she wouldn't let go. I had to pull her hand away to walk out. And that's the hardest decision that I ever had to make. But I know I made the right decision because I wasn't going to allow my mother to suffer any longer. So when you want to talk about morality, let's talk about there's suffering in this morals. Sorry, I don't mean to sound like a politician or something.
No, it's okay.
That's all right. No, these are great points. Actually, they really are.
You're speaking from your experience, and that gives it power.
Agreed. Okay. So I'm going to chime in here if you don't mind, because somebody had asked in the chat about biblical quotes. You want to get some education there? If we want to go down that rabbit hole. Okay. So in our little debate sources chat, I shared something from one of the most conservative sides to religious. This is on Focus of the Family. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about them. And they actually have a page about how Christians should respond to the fear or reality of pain and suffering. How should Christians respond to personal challenges, disabilities, and infirmities? Job experience, physical, spiritual, and psychological suffering. Does suffering have spiritual value? I mean, there's a list here. Here's one, but it's my body. Don't I have a right to choose when I die? And they have 2 biblical quotes. Are you ready? Because this is the educational part, not proselytizing. I'm just educating here, just to put a little note. Okay, I'm not that uber batshit crazy religious. I'm just showing you the other side to that, just to let you know. That's the educator in me. Okay.
You don't have to defend your beliefs.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So the first one is from 1 Corinthians 3:16-17. Do you know that you are a temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, and that is what you are. 1 Corinthians 6, 19, 20. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and that you are not your own? For you have been bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body. Okay. Another question they asked, and I mean, there's a whole list in there, but that just gives you an example coming from the religious perspective. So I wanted to bring that out since somebody had asked.
There's no dignity in pain. Is my opinion on the matter. So. But yeah, as for the I'm gonna reconnect from my computer, which has restarted. Could you pull me back in when I jump, please?
Yeah, of course.
Definitely, we'll do.
So here's kind of like I guess one of the final parts of my argument, right? Or at least a question that we should consider. Like, is it morally acceptable for physicians to cause death intentionally?
Anyone who has any input, feel free to chime in.
Sometimes.
Yeah, maybe to clarify, you mean outside of the physician-assisted suicide context, or just that included when you say that?
Like that included, like to like there are some people who are like, the role of the physician is only to heal. You can never do harm, and death is harm, so you cannot inflict death upon a patient.
But isn't making somebody live through something that's harming them harmful?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like I would make that argument, right? Like, is it acceptable to cause death intentionally? Like, if we accept that there are circumstances such as defending oneself from assault, where you can inflict death on somebody as like a lay person, then like there might be such a circumstance for like physicians. And in the case of assisted dying, death is inflicted intentionally with the purpose of respecting the patient's autonomy and easing their transition into death. It's basic harm reduction in my mind.
That's a really good point, Jack. Like, how does this fall in line, or does it not fall in line at all with the Hippocratic Oath?
Well, yeah, I actually pulled a quote from a doctor who came down with ALS, leaving him completely wheelchair bound, essentially able only to communicate with his eyes. And he published a piece in CanFam Physician in 2016, and he had a really good quote from that, saying, "The Hippocratic Oath that we all recited upon graduation tells us to do no harm to our patients. I think that sometimes inaction while a patient is suffering with a terminal illness is to do harm."
Wow.
And
Proletariat, feel free to share your cam, by the way. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Frightus,
We'll let you,
Frightus,
Frightus, go. Do you want to give a brief intro to Little Proletariat? We're having him sub in for Sonsol because of the connection issues. Should we do a little intro for him?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
And
yeah. So
then we'll get to Frightus and then to Jack.
Okay, great. So yeah, Proletariat, if you want to give just like a brief intro of who you are, and maybe just like 1 to 2 sentences on where you fall on this morality issue, and then we'll get back to Lord Frightus' argument on the topic.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me? I don't know if the camera's showing up, but okay, I think on camera everything's up,
Looking
right?
sound great.
Lovely. Cool. Well, I appreciate everyone having me. I am the Little Proletariat. We do a cultural kind of take on leftist politics. So we look at movies, YouTube, music, and kind of search historical, philosophical, and religious, spiritual concepts within all the art that, kind of we're saturated within. And in terms of the issue that y'all were just currently discussing, just to kind of piggyback to show where I kind of come from with this situation, the ability to, address the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm, just like the morality of this discussion itself is very much kind of up for, splitting hairs, because you look at somebody who will, trigger warning, will cut you open to fix your heart, right? You're doing harm to the person. You're cutting them open. Your body's not supposed to be open. So in a real way, you are doing more harm to kind of do less harm to a certain degree. I don't know if that makes sense. In another way, you have someone, you need to give them some sort of resuscitative, attention. You might, break someone's ribs while trying to bring them back to life. You're doing harm even if you don't abide by the Hippocratic Oath. It seems kind of tangential, but the point being is, in a situation where someone is lucid enough to say, yeah, I'm miserable and this is something that I'm doing myself, the Hippocratic Oath would be what is doing less harm to this person. Them being consistently in pain is harm. And by you not acting when someone has a broken leg and you can fix it, you're doing harm to them, right? Now, if you have to break the leg a little bit more in order to make it better, then that's fine. That's an okay kind of parameter to be within when it comes to the Hippocratic Oath. But when it comes to, yeah, this person is not going to feel better, they've tried every option, and we can get into the specifics about who deserves to go and whatnot, and that's all kind of down to determination of the self, who gets to make those decisions based on what. Is it depression, is it constant pain, what constitutes. But at the end of the day, specifically about the Hippocratic Oath, we are able to look at it not as a binary where it's you either hurt somebody or you don't hurt somebody, because we give people pills that give them side effects that last forever. So there's a little bit of nuance, and I think that the nuance is more specifically directed towards how, the bureaucracy of death, as I mentioned earlier in my intro, is what we should focus on. How can we make this procedure and this experience the most beneficial for the client or the patient, as opposed to whether or not it's a thing we should do at all? Because if you're going by the Hippocratic Oath, it would be your duty to listen to the client as opposed to your elitist opinion on whether or not they should suffer for the rest of their life when you don't have to suffer. So, yep, that's kind of where I look at it from. And most of my research comes from watching You Don't Know Jack, which was a 2010 straight to streaming or straight to move, however you want to say it, in 2010, a movie from HBO that talks about Jack Kevorkian and just kind of the optics of how to fight for the right for people to make these decisions. So it's an interesting way of looking at it, less so the morality, but more so like, do you have business cards? Do you charge people? So it's very interesting, and there's a lot of depth to it. But me personally, I think it's open and shut case that people should be able to do what they want with their lives.
So I see a lot of nods, which is amazing. Thank you, Proletariat.
Of course.
We're gonna have Jack, and then we're gonna have Lord Fright Juice right after.
Oh,
Oh, you were first, Fright Juice? Okay.
Yeah,
you go
he had
first,
raised his
Fright.
hand a while ago.
Oh,
Yeah, so let
sorry
him
about
go
that.
and then
Sorry
Jack.
about that. So Fright Juice, you go, and then Jack.
Because this meshes to what I was trying to say with my anecdotal thing with my grandmother, who was I don't know how much you can catch about me telling you about that, but basically a physician were neglecting his duty and didn't catch that she had type 2 diabetes. And I think there are important concerns when we make laws on who is supposed to die, right? We need to be extremely careful to avoid any kind of abuse. The medical community is in its immense majority is composed of principled individuals. I have no doubt about that. But if anything, the anti-vax conspiracy and COVID crisis have proved to us that there are a handful of individuals that will play fast and loose with their ethical obligations, right? Medical doctors have a great power of influence over their patients, and I wouldn't put it past a few bad apples to influence vulnerable patients to put an end to their lives. And to that end, I will quote an article published in the Journal of Ethics titled Legacy of Abuse in a Secret Profession, another call to change by Janet Rose or such. I don't know how I'm supposed to pronounce that, which is apparently also an MD. I vividly remember the conversation that I had with my attending physician and the chief neurosurgeon resident about a medication error that resulted in a serious complication. Although the attending physician was professional, responsible, and apologetic during the conversation, the senior resident was not. Instead, I would characterize his exchange with me as arrogant, defensive, and dismissive. The asymmetry between us, me the debilitated patient with an intracranial hematoma who could not ambulate, and he, towering figure in a white coat, was not lost on me. I wonder, though, is it possible that his own endurance of 5 years of neurosurgery residency had taken a toll on his ability to extend a compassionate response to me? What abuses had he suffered, and how might they made him so incapable of kind professional response? So my point here is we imbue the medical profession with authority over our body, and thus this power needs to come with some kind of oversight. And this is one of the, I think, one of the important points of this conversation.
Yeah. It's, when Little Proletariat and you, Lord, you both brought up like kind of how bureaucracy interacts with this system, how we are deferring power to the medical structures around us. And so I think, like, to that end, we should probably like go over at least my rudimentary understanding of how the system works, at least in the state of Oregon, for example.
Excuse me about that.
And
feel free to take it in that direction.
okay. So there are two non-medical qualifications for you to qualify for this under the Death with Dignity Act in Oregon. The first is that you have to be a patient over 18 years old, and you have to be a resident of the state. So those are the two non-medical qualifications. And essentially what happens is at the beginning of this, you will say, I want to pursue like medically assisted death. And then they're like, okay, well, I have to go document that you just told me that. Basically every step of the way, they have to write down and document how, like, what happened, what was the context of what happened, etc. And so after you tell them that you want to die, it can be an oral request. And so then you have to wait 15 days. And during that time, essentially, you get asked like questions about why do you feel this way, what brought you to this conclusion, and they need to assess your mental state. Now, it's not an express requirement for them to get a psychological consultation, but it's highly recommended that they do at this point, to assess like your mental capabilities, to see if maybe there's some sort of alternative treatment to alleviate symptoms or help you manage your mental state better in some way, get you the help you need so you don't have to pursue this option, essentially. And also important to note, every step of this process is controlled by your attending physician. If your attending physician is like morally against you pursuing this avenue, they are required by law to refer you to a doctor who can, or at least refer you to resources that allow you to find a doctor who can. And let's see. It's recommended that physicians at this point refer you to like a hospice program of some kind to like help you and your family with like social welfare needs that might arise as like a result of your passing. And then they need to evaluate like the terminality of your illness. And this is kind of where like I think a lot of people get caught up, right? Like, I think you can interpret terminal to mean both physical and mental anguish. I think that would be a fair assessment. Maybe that's too broad. But I would include mental illness as well in there. And then they have to refer you to a specialist that specializes in treating that specific thing. And that specialist then consults with the attending physician. And then at this point, it's been, 15 days, and the physician also needs to determine whether or not you were coerced into asking for this treatment by asking about your life, the conditions that you're under, et cetera, et cetera. Then the process dictates that you need to verbally ask a second time, confirming that you want to have this treatment done. And let's see, the doctor needs to specifically offer you the opportunity to rescind your request at that point, or else the prescription for these drugs cannot be written. Then the patient has to be made aware that it's very important to have another person present at the time of you taking the drugs, and that you shouldn't take them in public. And so far, there are no instances of this happening in public where people have taken these drugs and passed away in public spaces. So as far as I could tell, doing like some background research, I haven't found any instances of this law being abused to like coerce family members into dying. I know that was kind of a worry that was brought up on the panel earlier. And so the law at this point makes a distinction between informed consent and an informed decision, where an informed decision is basically the doctor has to sit down with you and explain exactly all of the details involved with the procedure and the surrounding implications of it, as opposed to like informed consent where like a doctor can give you like a general overview of a situation and you can just like consent to that. And so here's what is required to be conveyed to the patient with full details. Their medical diagnosis, their prognosis on how they might turn out, the potential risks associated with taking the medication, the probable result of taking the medication, and the possibility that although death may occur within 3 hours, death may take longer, and the feasible alternatives if there is any. But that includes like comfort care, hospice care, pain control, etc. So they're like at every step of the way here, you're given every opportunity to change your mind. And then on top of that, you also need to write a written consent. And that written consent must be made 48 hours prior to the prescription being written. And you also have to sign it with witnesses, at least 2 witnesses, one of which, like, it can't be the physician, has to be someone, and it has to include one person who is not a relative by blood, marriage, adoption, heir, or an employee of the healthcare facility. So then, on top of that, immediately prior to writing the prescription, the physician must confirm again that the patient is making a informed decision, and then the attending physician may directly provide the medication to the patient or write a prescription. Each of those then branches off into its own way of how to handle that in regards to like the bureaucracy. So it's when people talk about this subject, I think a lot of people make it sound like, oh yeah, the doctor can just like write you a prescription like normal and like just hand it to you and you go off to get your pills. But that's not how it works at all. It's a highly controlled process. Every step of the way is highly documented, because if it's not highly documented, then the doctor becomes liable for possibly killing their patient. And so there is a whole lot of incentive built into that bureaucracy to make sure that what they're doing is by the books and, is both doing right by the patient and also, making sure that, they're covering their own butts. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Jack. So Comic Girl has her hand up. She messaged to me. And then I'd like to hear from Proletariat, Fright Juice, Sebs, and Angel Rider in that order, because we haven't heard from your points and Angel Rider especially in a bit. So let's do it that way.
Oh, hold on. One second. I'm sorry. He never gives me time to talk, and that's fine. That's why I'm in the basement. But in reference to Jackalope, it's not what you said. That you never said anything wrong. Some of it was anecdotal, but I was able to search up something.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find any issues where you are correct. I can't find any issues where a patient has abused the drugs.
Mhm.
That is just a not happening thing, and I have searched far and wide for that. But I was able to find the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund where people are reporting abuses of the process. So if anybody wants to read up on that, that is in Debate Sources and Discussion channel. It's probably good for people who are anti or a little bit on the fence with all this to read some of those because they're very good.
Yeah, and just real quick, I will say that there are some issues with the reporting process that might lead to some people falling through the cracks. I just I haven't found any, like, I guess large legal cases or related to this, but yeah,
Can I
definitely do your
ask
due
if
diligence.
Can I ask if all the information you were giving is um do is done all across the states that have it, or just Oregon?
So the information that I was quoting was taken from essentially the Oregon Death and Dignity Act guidebook, which is essentially a piece of guidance written for physicians in the state of Oregon. And I believe that Oregon's laws are essentially the template for a lot of places in the United States. I can't speak for countries like the Netherlands who have similar laws, but as far as I understand it, it's essentially similar across the board in other states except for Montana, because Montana's weird.
Thank you for that clarification. And thank you for that question, Seb. Comic Girl, we'll start off with you.
I actually didn't really have anything to say. I just kind of wanted to add and ask if maybe a little bit later in the discussion we can talk about how too stringent in some of these places it is to be able to get access to this procedure.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, I wanted to throw out there that yeah, there is a significant number of people who try to get this treatment and either pass away before they're eligible for it, or there are also people who sign up for it and go through the process and then decide not to take the pills, not to take the medication, and that is roughly 33% of the people who ask for it.
Thank you for that point of clarification. Let's start with Proletariat. Well, then we'll go to you, Sebs, and then Fright Juice, and then Angel Rider. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to say that. So basically, only 66% or 2/3 are the ones who are dying from these procedures.
Mhm.
Just-
Yeah, so I appreciate the perspective that everyone is bringing. In terms of the terminally ill aspect of it, I believe we already kind of addressed it, how it's kind of an undefinable term. In the program that I had watched the movie, one of the issues that's addressed and explored is not just the people who were chosen to go through with the assisted suicide with Jack Kevorkian, but also the people that Kevorkian had to say no to. Um, the very beginning of the film is about the optics of having people who are being essentially helped to end their suffering in the public eye. This is the 90s when the news is really kind of immersive in that sense, where everyone was seeing what was happening. I believe it was Michigan, and the optics of it are you have one person, this woman, who is in pain and she does not want to live anymore, and then you have another person who is in pain and doesn't want to live, but the person that was the gentleman, their pain was more easily quantified, whereas the woman was clearly suffering, clearly just wanted to end her suffering, but because of the optics of it, that woman didn't get the opportunity to do it like the person who was clearly definably struggling. So the point that I'm trying to bring up is, something that Comic Girl just kind of brought up, which was, what about the people that don't get approved? They will live suffering and they will be forgotten. No one will address them, and instead what we will address are the few cases in which there is reported abuse, in which I would respond, if you could find me a system that is immune to abuse, you would have a supercomputer, right? Because even condoms are only 99% effective. So it comes with the idea that, like, yeah, some people are going to always abuse systems, always. And if we are afraid that abusing um, the system here would mean life or death, you also have to understand that this is the same argument that fundamentalists were having, let's say back with ether, right? People weren't allowed to have any sort of painkiller during their procedures because of fundamentalism, because of dogma. Opening someone's chest and replacing their heart was considered to be taboo. So these are all things that um, are going to be debated, obviously. Like, oh, will there be people who are just harvesting organs because they're able to, A, B, and C? And Kevorkian got a lot of heat for also pushing during the, assisted suicide to use those organs as well. So it's a very glib, dark topic to talk about. But if we just, if it's just all going to be like, yeah, we don't know the abuse that's going to happen, and because it's such a hefty, finite type of solution, we should be more careful. I agree, but as we have heard before from people, people greater than ourselves have spoken to up until this time, is basically just, you're not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and we can have things like even priests. There needs to be, like, Kevorkian was very very stern and frank, and it wasn't a very pretty experience, but we could also do that as well, have a priest in the room or someone that is reflective of your religion. So basically, long story short, the abuse that could come with it is abuse that can come with any system. Even having organs replaced and stuff, there is a market for organs, and we're willing to accept that reality in order to help people get better. And for these people, getting better is a little different than what is typically seen in the medical community, but still an inevitability for everyone at some point.
So Sebs and Freyus. Oh, sorry. Oh, Freyus, did you have something to say?
No, let's Seb go first.
Well, Sebs and Freyus, I actually have seen Angel Rider nod really heavily at what Proletariat has to say. Because we haven't heard from Angel Rider just too that much in our debate, what Sebs and Freyus, would you be okay with Angel Rider responding first to Proletariat?
Of course.
That's okay. Okay, let's go. Angel Rider, can we have you?
Yeah, I was not. I'm so glad you brought up Jack Kevorkian. That was one aspect I wanted to throw out too, because I remember back, because he's from that's my neck of the woods here in the Detroit area. And I remember when he came up with the whole suicide, the assisted suicide machine and everything. And on the local news almost all the time, he was on, and oh my God. And to say that maybe he was a little nuts, yeah, you could say he was a little nuts. Was he very frank and honest? Yeah, he was. Eventually, and I don't remember when this was, but he did go to jail because he was hell-bent, determined to say, I'm going to do this. This is my thing. This is my baby. This is my invention. I'm going to do it come hell or high water. Even if I have to go to jail for it, which he did, and he starved to death until he had a trial, and I believe I don't know if somebody can bring the source on that, because I don't know exactly from the top of my head, but he was eventually released. But yeah, he said, hey, if I go to jail for it, I'm going to starve to death because this is my thing. I want to do it with dignity to show. And he was a fighter. He really
I remember
was.
that. I remember
He
that.
did.
I was there too. I remember that.
Yep. And
If I could just chime in for 5 seconds. Oh, sorry. Continue.
You can chime in, Proletariat, but you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so basically, the reason Kevorkian, he had tried the legal system many times by continuously making it the patients who are pulling or doing some sort of mechanism that would allow it to happen. He got really kind of, excuse my frankness in the vein of Kevorkian, he got real ballsy with it and actually videotaped himself doing the pulling of the plug based on the patient saying, yes, please do it. And that's what he went to jail for, because up until then, he had just let them do it. It was assisted suicide to a certain degree. But what he actually went down for was actually pulling the plug, which is what a physician is supposed to do in the first place. They were kind of just dancing around it. So yeah, you're exactly right. He did make a stance. He was kind of loony, but also very frank.
Oh yeah, and he had the infamous Jeffrey Feiger, who he now does a lot of high profile cases. He actually kind of became famous just off of that too. I did want to bring up a question though, and it reverts to today for COVID-19 patients.
So,
Where does yeah?
Sorry, Angel Rider. Before we get to that question, which feel free to bring it up, would it be okay with you if we have Sebs and Fright Use have the opportunity to respond to what has been said so far?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, Sebs, go for it.
Oh my god. I really had nothing really to include, but just that I do believe that there is still some cases that it's necessary. I think the main problem with making it legal right now is that basically the whole system, and there are still many holes legally. Um, as as Jack said, like there is a very strict procedure in Oregon right now. Um, I'm going to back to a point I mentioned very early on about that Washington law says patients will self-administer the drugs, but defines self-administer to mean just ingesting, but ingesting ordinarily just means absorbing and swallowing. So this does not seem to bar others from administering the drugs. If, if such action is in accord with the act, it may not be threatened with homicide. So, like, it kind of opposes the example that it, it was talked about. So, in this case, in Washington at least, if someone were to administer the drugs when the patient might have, like, I mean, it's hypotheticals in this point, but might have regretted in the last moment, like they wouldn't be charged with homicide. And these are the kind of lakes in the legal law and all these possible abuses that comes with, again, capitalism and the system and all the self like interest in people. And also something I read, I don't remember where, that I thought it was kind of fucked up, was that when people aided the person, in some cases they were able to get their, basically their heritage, the money or the
Inheritance.
material good, yeah, the inheritance from the person they aided. And I thought that that was kind of like weird and very like problematic, and it can easily be landed to very heavily be abused. So those are kind of my still concerns. And of course I think that if we were able to like put in place a perfect kind of law and everything to be perfectly stipulated with every nuance and everything, like we would like just have it a perfect system. But we don't have it. And again, like always be reminded about the importance of mental health and everything too. Yeah.
Can I just hop in really quickly?
Yep, you can hop in. You have 30 seconds.
Okay. Essentially, when it comes to like consenting to the procedure, the patient's mental capability and proper procedure are essentially irrelevant to rescission of the request, meaning that any indication of rescinding the request must be documented and explored immediately. So if like the patient literally can't consent anymore, then it's basically not. They don't go through with it. At that point it would be illegal.
Got it. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, Fright Juice?
Sure. To the point that our friend from the prototype was making, like I'm personally not opposed on principle to physician-assisted suicide. I have like gut feelings against someone terminating their own life in general, but it's mine, and I understand that. Given that other people may choose otherwise for themselves, I'm perfectly fine with it. It's their life, it's their choice. I have no problem. My whole argument here tonight has been more a call for vigilance and implementing the right system that would allow people to indeed end their life with dignity while ensuring that those for whom it is not warranted do well are not pushed through this process against their will. What Jack has said so far seem to be that Oregon and other probably governments have been able to safely implement that, and I wish for other places in the world to be able to safely, like my own country doesn't allow for euthanasia or that kind of stuff, and I would very much like to see that, given that we have some more, some stronger safety net than there is in the US. And I'm gonna reiterate that it's important for this procedure to be ethical and safely administered, that universal healthcare is implemented in the US, I think.
Does anyone have an immediate response to Lord Virtues? If not, we'll go to Angel Rider's question. No? Okay. Angel Rider, so what was the guiding question that you presented? And Virtues, thank you so much for that well-crafted response to Proletariat.
What's going on with COVID-19 right now? How do we think that the physician-assisted suicide would come into play, especially these days?
I mean, I maybe this is more something Doc can speak on.
Yeah, I think maybe that's more of a factual question. Doc should, if you have an answer to, maybe you can give us some insight on that.
I have an answer, but it's largely dependent on my state.
Gotcha.
So I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really know in regards to COVID how it's being directed around the nation, but in regards to where I am, it is being seen as something more elective.
Okay.
In terms of it being more surgically administered. However, in regards to where it's being administered through medication, it is not being seen as such, and would not technically be impacted by COVID, because people would still be able to see physicians for something like this in states that are legal. But as far as the any type of national mandate or national direction in regards to how physician-assisted suicides are supposed to go during COVID, I don't know. I'm not currently aware of if there is any.
Okay.
I think now might be a good time to transition a little bit. I know we've already kind of hinted towards this as more of the legal scientific side of things. Morality can still come up, but I think we might want to kind of go into chapter 2 of this debate. And I think Lumination actually had a decent legal question to kind of open things up if you want to open it up with that.
Okay, so I've been reading the room a little bit and trying to figure out where you guys might differ or might want to talk about things. And what I settled on was, how should insurance companies, particularly life insurance companies, handle euthanasia, death with dignity practices with their policies? And whoever wants to start can raise their hand, or so you want to start, Proletariat? Go right ahead.
Thank you. When it comes to things of monetary nature, it's always going to be a little bit more sensitive for people, just because like what was being said earlier, we don't want people going through this being pushed through the system for any sort of benefit or whatever. But it's basically the same thing, in my opinion, as it is electing for the procedure in the first place, right? The idea that um, paying out a life insurance policy on somebody who is choosing to opt out, if you will. It seems like it would be something that could be taken advantage of, but we also have to take into consideration that at the end of the day, most people's prime directive is survival. And if survival means literally ending your life um, in order for you to get money for your family, that's a huge decision. And that shouldn't be written off as just something as like a trailer park boys type scheme to get a couple of bucks. People are making these decisions, and it's really heavy to make the decision to end your own life. So to benefit someone else with the money that could come out of a life insurance policy, um, I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, as a communist, when it comes to life insurance companies losing money because more people are getting payouts because they're electing to leave on their own time instead of when their life insurance policy expires, or whatever loopholes they have been jumping through, I think that we can support a little bit of the other side of the rare case in which someone might be taking advantage of the system by ending their life early. That's a risk I'm willing to take. I genuinely think that there's more being taken advantage of in other sectors that could be, kind of closed up to make up for the money that's lost by health insurance or life insurance agencies. But honestly, good riddance to that money. The people who have to suffer through this often end up at a one-way road where they're like, I just spent a bunch of money and now my health insurance isn't even paying out what I thought would have happened because I decided to wait 6 years of having my loved ones suffer, and now I don't even get paid out. So just like there's usually no humanity or empathy by a corporation for the people that are going through these hard times and don't want to deal with money, I genuinely don't think we as ethical human beings should care or worry. Obviously, there's going to be some bureaucrat who's going to try to close up those holes. I'm more concerned with the people who don't get approved, who do need this procedure. And just because someone might benefit from it monetarily, they're way bigger fish to fry than, oh, is this company who already makes money off of people suffering going to make a little less money? So be it.
Does anyone have a response to a proletariat? And thank you for your argument, proletariat.
I mean, fuck the bourgeois.
True.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I basically fundamentally agree with proletariat, but I do wanted to add that I think that these kinds of decisions shouldn't be made in the first place. Like people shouldn't have to choose between like giving money to their families to try to survive in this capitalist system or in debt basically, or keep living with them in still poverty. So it's again the main problem in everything. I think will fundamentally always be the capitalist nature of our system and our society. So yeah, it's like fuck the fuck the health insurers, fuck them, because like
Fuck the system.
yeah, like people shouldn't be like dying or having to choose to die in order for their families to like
Right?
survive.
You got it, dude.
Yeah.
So,
If you had a response, proletariat, you have 30 seconds. I'll give you 30
make it
seconds, and then I'll go to Jack.
I'll make it easy in 15 seconds. Yeah, genuinely, like there shouldn't be incentive for people to do something like this. But the fact that there could be is obviously a product of people who can't just, make it out there without having to cut some corners in order to make it. So maybe this is more 30 seconds, but I just want to conclude with saying that, in order for you to die or to be born, it's going to cost you a lot of money to begin with. So This is basically just trying to even the odds as opposed to take advantage of the system, because you're going to be paying money going out either way.
So as regards like health insurance or life insurance, right? Like there's a reason like you can't just go and get a life insurance policy and then like go and jump off a bridge, right? Like generally what ends up happening is there's like a 2-year waiting period after you sign up for life insurance, in which you can't like if you commit suicide, you know, it voids out. It's basically to discourage people from doing exactly that and taking advantage of the life insurance company. And after that, it's essentially kind of the same either way. Like if you're in a state where it's already legal to have physician-assisted death, then it's largely treated the same as like an elective procedure, like if you have a living will that says do not resuscitate, right? It's treated as like an order to end your life. Like we already have comparisons to that. And if we're not making like a moral distinction between these actions, then like if it's legal and I mean that's essentially how it would affect the system. It wouldn't. Oh, and also like the data shows that having these policies in place doesn't actually increase the number of people dying. Stays relatively constant. This policy is for fringe cases of people who want to take these decisions into their own hands.
Anyone have a response? I saw Fried Juice. You seemed to have a reaction to what Jack said.
Oh, it's about mostly the numbers. I at no point have I thought that it would like lead to like massacre of patients. That's like never been my point. I think that the objections and caveats I raised was more for fringe cases that I think would potentially occur, and if well, like if anything, like I have well, I have a slight suspicion that having these policies could in some way open the door for kind of eugenicism, and I'm like this goes beyond the scope of the of this conversation, but again, it's more a question of being cautious, allowing for things to happen, but be like again, we're legislating. Well, we are proposing policies about death, and it's. I think at every step it's important to be very vigilant what we say and what we push for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think to that end, though, I think that's why it's really important to be able to provide this option to people. Like especially for the 33% of people who take the option of going down this road and then decide that they don't want to actually take the pills. For them, knowing that they have that option, and even if they don't say to their doctor that they want to, you know, end their own life with dignity, it can be a great source of reported relief for them and actually aid in their medical care by relieving their stress.
If may I piggyback on that?
Yeah, you have 30 seconds, Comic Girl, and Fright Juice. You had your hand raised, correct?
Yeah, I have a quick point to make about that.
Okay.
Let me just piggyback off that real quick before I lose it. So, having access to something that can initially just end your life right there, right then, as somebody who thinks about that all the time and has had that option at times, there is a certain sense of security in knowing, at least from a mental health aspect, I can't speak to incurable diseases, but knowing that you have that option does sometimes make you think twice about actually using it.
Fried cheese.
Yes, I should have pull that study way before, because I thought of this when I was researching the subject. And one thing what would be, I think, important, why medically assisted suicide is important, is it opens a door and relieves some anxiety. And we know that anxiety is a major fact. Well, no, it's not a major fact. It's a factor in uh, recovering from chemotherapy, for instance. And to that end, if people have clearly the option saying, if the process becomes too painful for you, you can like opt out, but just bail out and end it. I think one benefit would be relieving that stress and having that choice, that option. Um, However, and again, it comes together with, we need health insurance for everyone for it to function. So yeah.
And yeah, like I would be 100. I'm 100% with you when it comes to caution, especially because I can definitely see how like you can draw a connection between this and possible very eugenicsy topics, you know. And I don't generally believe in slippery slopes, but I think eugenics is a pretty slippery slope into fascism. Um, that being said, like I the data I've seen, like I pulled a study from 2007, you know, taking a look at the data from Oregon and the Netherlands, and there doesn't seem to be a heightened risk of death to any one particular group, including like the elderly or the poor or the disabled. In fact, the only group that suffered like an increased risk of like death as a result of this were people diagnosed with AIDS. Um, and I have a feeling that that might correlate a bit to education, and you know, treatment has improved over time, so maybe the numbers look a bit different today. I just haven't found more recent information.
If I may, I don't know if anyone has something they want to chime in with, but in terms of you know, something as serious as the ending of life, whether it be abortion or war, the discrepancies are always there, in which we want to dictate who or which types of death are okay. So specifically, what I'm getting at is, you know, when it comes to implementing something like physician-assisted suicide, which is going to help ease suffering, and it's an elected type of death, there's discomfort that the choice will somehow be lost sometimes, and there's a portion that will be pushed into this decision where we don't have the same time nor care for nuance when we need to invade a country because of X, Y, or Z. So the point is, we're willing to murder indiscriminately and then figure it out afterwards. Oh, maybe we'll tone this back, we'll figure out how to do this better, but we need to do this. So it, you know, the fact that we need to murder is more of a priority than allowing people to decide on whether or not they want to you know, continue living, let's say, in a state that is not providing them with clean water, and they've suffered because of the you know, inaction of the state, and now they are being hindered by the state to even be able to not drink that water. So at the end of the day, we don't really have a choice if we want to, you know, do it ourselves. But if we want to get hired to go do it over, you know, seas, we barely, I mean, it's a little harder to get into the military these days, I'm sure, but it's usually not, you know, scripted over immensely so we have like an out or like a game plan to get out. So there's planning obviously in anything that we do, but I just wish we'd have the same urgency to help people who are suffering, as opposed to people that we need to suffer in order to get a political point across.
Sebs, is that a hand?
Uh, Not not really, but I did wanted to add that. Um, oh my god, I'm blinking. Uh,
We can get back to you later if
yeah,
you would like.
yeah, get back to me. I'm lost.
Uh, we'll go to Fright Juice if you have anything to say, Fright Juice, and then we'll go to Angel Rider.
I'm good so far.
Angel Rider, do you have anything to say about what's been said so far?
I'm
You're
so- yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna go with the proletariat on this one. I agree that there's a lot, not just the sister. There is a lot of suffering in the world. I definitely agree with it. I mean, you got homelessness issues, or what we still have in Michigan. We have the Flint water crisis and the Flint water situation that has not been solved ever since it got screwed up way back a couple years ago. So I think if we have to look at everything once again, it kind of piggies back and kind of circles around back to the morality thing again, which it really does. And I really think that, I mean, regardless of the suffering, you want to do what you can to ease another person's suffering, no matter what, because what you're doing is that's almost like a service that you're giving to them, I think, in a way. That's and some people can consider that more like a selfless act, if you will. So that's where I'm coming with that.
If I could remark and piggyback off what you were saying,
Sure.
in regards to Flint specifically, the reason I brought it up is because you have the state during the 90s and the Kevorkian years, if you will, that was fighting to ensure that people did not have this option to end their suffering. And then you fast forward to the state knowing that they were basically going to have a bunch of people that were poisoned and said, you know what? We don't know how to figure this out. We can't figure out the schematics. We can't figure out, the procedure, what needs to happen in order for this to get fixed in a economic way or whatever. So we'll either punt or kick it down the field or whatever you want to say. And, there's no urgency there to protect people's lives that's being affected by the state, because that's essentially regulation that needs to happen because we've been putting this off for too long. So again, I hate to ramble, but the point being is, like, the urgency is there for certain things, like, oh, you can't, but when it comes to actually protecting it's obviously more of a, like you said, moral, religious, dogmatic type issue than it actually is about the procedure. Because if it was about the procedure, then, like, Michigan, I think, is a great example that you have that kind of dichotomy of the state not doing anything and then the state doing too much.
Yep. Very true. Very true.
Jack, I see you nodding. Would you happen to have some input for this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the state has strange priorities, and it's not just the state, it's a lot of other like institutions underneath the state, right? Like we can look at the media, for example. Oftentimes when this discussion is played out in the media, it tends towards hyperbole, it tends towards absurdism, trying to make people who undergo this look ridiculous, or like the process to seem unsafe, because that makes for a more sensationalist story. And the example I was thinking of is the case of Noah Pothoven, I believe. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But this was a case of a Dutch teenager who had been abused throughout her childhood. She'd been raped several times, had severe PTSD, had many mental health issues on top of that. She famously wrote like a memoir while she was within like youth mental health institutions. And she was famously going around trying to get treatment. She wanted to get euthanasia, and was very public about that desire. And that got misreported in the U.S. as she was given euthanasia in the Netherlands. And oh my gosh, like what this misuse of this medical malpractice. And the reality was that she didn't get euthanasia. She was denied euthanasia so many times, and she had attempted suicide so many times that instead what happened was she just point blank refused to eat or drink anything. And the result being that her family finally, despite the fact that she wasn't receiving euthanasia, she started receiving palliative care at home. And essentially, they allowed her to pass away in her home, surrounded by her friends and family. But she didn't get euthanasia. She just refused to eat or drink until she died. And that gets that.
And that's suffering.
Yeah, and she was all partially doing it as a political statement because she couldn't get the treatment that she needed to end her life in a more dignified way.
Because that was the only control that she had over her bodily autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a horrible way to go. To suffer by hunger and thirst and know that you're not allowed to just end the suffering.
And
wow, sorry.
Well, no. I mean, it's a very valid point. And I think that especially in this case, a lot of people talk about terminal illness as it relates to death, and we kind of or physical illness. And we touched on this earlier, but I think that there are arguably a lot of cases where mental illness could also be causing just as much anguish or similar symptoms to what a terminal cancer illness might be causing. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who might hear that and think, oh, you're giving depressed people permission to take their own lives, and that's not what I'm doing at all. What I'm trying to say is that no one except for the individual undergoing their own experiences, undergoing their own physical struggles, knows their own suffering. Your doctor doesn't know your suffering, you do. And so this is, I mean, very much a case where I believe, from having read through it, that she pursued a lot of the avenues available to her. She was in and out of mental institutions for years. And it's a really, really sad case. But I need to point out that when people bring this up to this day, I actually, at the beginning of my stream to come on here, there were people in my chat bringing up this case as a way of discrediting, physician-assisted death. And she wasn't euthanized. She wasn't, this isn't even a physician-assisted death. She chose to die. And the reality is we live in a world where people can do that with or without a physician. And I think the most ethical and least harmful choice is to allow them to pass with dignity under the care of a physician.
Thank you, Jack. Proletariat, go on.
As an addendum to what Jack just said, there is the case from BBC News covered in full on the debate sources and discussion for anybody who wants to reference that later.
Awesome. Thank you. Proletariat, I saw your hand. Sebs, I saw your hand after Proletariat. And then we'll go to Fright Juice and Angel.
I'll make it as quick as I can, which is not great promise coming from me, but I did write an analysis about the movie for y'all, so I'm going to read you something that's a little bit relevant. The scene opens up with the diner cook scrambling some eggs, followed by an odd shot of Kevorkian holding up a slice of turkey and looking through it with the help of the light behind it. It's almost a nod to the audience to really inspect not just the next scenes coming up in the film, but the pre-established norms and practices in our daily life. The scene centers around Kevorkian comparing what U.S. doctors do to what Nazi Germany did. And of course, the journalist interviewing him cannot fathom the comparison. But what is the pulling the plug, but the humane act, whereas the Nazi Germany type act would be forcing people through legality to pass away because of starvation. So the point being, it's really easy for us to have these really small examples of people that may or may not have gone through the proper procedures or whatever. But the slippery slope that we were addressing before about eugenics and whatnot, the opposite side of that is true as well, because you have people like this young gentleman in the movie played by Kylo Ren, who was suffering, and in order for him to deal with the suffering, he tried to end his life by pouring kerosene on himself. And, not to get brutal about it, but he didn't survive. And he wanted a way out. And Kevorkian had to say, no, I'm sorry, but you can still technically live a fulfilling life. Therefore, technically, through legal means, we cannot help you. So it ends up being this really sick, kind of inhumane system that's like, look, you can take pills that are going to make you feel weird, and then you can take pills that are going to combat that, but it's going to destroy your kidneys slowly but surely, and you're going to have a more painful death. Or we can figure it out, in terms of like, therapy for the person who was burned, or even this woman that Jackalope had brought up, where it's like, the only resource you have on your own life is you taking food in. And even in extreme cases, sometimes prisoners are forced to eat. So it's really this emphasis on, we'd rather keep you alive under all conditions than meet you halfway and understand that there might be some humane way of doing this. And that's the bureaucracy of death, like we brought up. So sorry for the ramble, y'all.
Oh, it's all good. Thank you for your point, Sebs.
Uh, it's also about what I wanted to talk about earlier, and I blanked in the middle of it. And I also want to thank Jack for making that perfect transition to what I wanted to talk about. That it was the loss of sense of control when someone wants to commit suicide, and how about suicide is basically the way that people gain that sense of control back, because they feel like their life is just basically spinning around, that they don't have control over anything, and they just feel like I can do anything because I'm just tied from everywhere, and the only thing I can do for myself is basically end my life. And that's what I wanted to hone in about, how some people sometimes feel like that, and especially elderly people, when we're talking about this assisted suicide. And for example, in the annual report of 2016 on Oregon, they said that basically 49, so basically almost half the sighted people, um, thought or felt like they were being a burden on their families or their close circles. And the same way goes to Washington, which was like 52% felt like a burden. And that's like feeling that, having that feeling, it's like something you cannot control, because you just see all your close, all your family, all your friends that seeing you in a different way, and that's something that you cannot control. And I feel like because of the lack of mental health resources and all of the stigma and everything, um, goes back to they just feel like, hey, I can get this option to kill myself in a legal way. So it's another kind of abuse to this system. And it's like, again, people shouldn't have to feel like they have to take these kinds of decisions, and there should be resources and systems in place in order to help them and assist them with the mental health and the resources to in order to help them basically. So yeah, that's something that I wanted to bring up about like the sense of control with suicide. And yeah.
Does anyone have a response to a Sebs?
I mean, oh no, please, I insist. After you.
Okay. I mean, my main response is that yeah, I mean, like we obviously need better mental health care in this country. We need better physical health care. We need all of that. I would just point out that a lot of these systems that have been set up are set up to catch people who might be making rash, impulsive decisions. And if they are making those decisions impulsively, or if they're making them out of a place of mental illness, then they are precluded from making these decisions for themselves under the existing laws where they've passed, as far as I understand it. Now, I do think that there is a problem in the existing system where it's possible for an attending physician to decide not to refer a patient for psychological consultation. There is a gap there. I acknowledge that. But yeah, I think generally kind of what like the little proletariat said earlier, like there are going to be gaps even if we had better mental health care. There are going to be gaps even if we had better physical health care. I would just say that I think in this case that I haven't seen any of the data to indicate that like people are abusing the system to be able to pass away more easily, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird or pass.
It's like
Yeah.
not necessarily, sorry for interrupting. It's
No, go
like
for it.
not necessarily abusing, but also like having people saying that they feel like a burden. It's like raising the red flags for uh, we have to be aware that they are feeling some type of way
Mm-hmm.
that obviously correlates with their mental health, and not necessarily that can be the make or break of their decision, because at the end of the day we won't be sure about that. But it's like things that we can also need to be aware of so we can be better prepared. And in accordance to what you were saying about people not abusing the system, uh, I haven't checked out if there are any cases for what I'm about to say, but uh, the law basically doesn't distinguish between the 6 months of life with or without treatment. So, for example, in the cases of diabetes or disabilities requiring ventilator support, people are still eligible to these little drugs. So that can still be some kind of abuse that is present because, like, with diabetes, yeah, you can still be alive with insulin, but if you are not provided with that, then you are in that 6 month period to die. So again, if we take in consideration the capitalism part, what's cheap, what's better in this capitalistic system to be spending more money for your daily, weekly, monthly insulin, or to just die? And it's again decisions that people shouldn't be having to make.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I don't mean to say that like there isn't a coercive element to capital. I don't mean to say
yeah,
that like, um, but regarding like specifically like the insulin and the diabetes, I I can't cite it from my notes, but I do remember going over that. And I think that there is like a provision that like, you know, under their definition of what is and is not terminal, it would have to be something that is a progressive illness.
oh, okay,
I believe I can't, I might be wrong on that one. I'll take the L on that if I am. Um, but yeah, I totally agree with you though that like the coercion is a huge problem, but that's a huge problem to capitalism in general.
yes,
I mean, like
yeah,
we've known that since like for a very long time. Like I just watched It's a Wonderful Life. The main plot point of that movie, if you've never seen it, people, is the main character despairing because of his financial situation and deciding that his family would be better off if he killed himself for insurance money. So I mean, similar to kind of what we're talking about tonight, and on in a couple ways, weirdly. And yeah, it's the coercion is going to be there until we take down capitalism, but that's an entirely different discussion, I think.
Proletariat, go for it. I was just in the bathroom, so if I missed anyone, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you. To kind of piggyback off Seb's and Jackalope, one specifically, to kind of merge everything that you both just talked about in a really silly way. These people come to a point in their life where, like we're saying, they feel like they're a burden. Maybe they actually are a burden. That's a consideration. Maybe they don't have anyone close to them that's a loved one that they could be a burden on. Therefore, their existence is way more of a struggle than, let's say, somebody who has a loved one that they can be, leaning on. So the point being is, to speak to what we were talking about in terms of capital, like, had there been a system in place that could maybe provide a living situation or give people the comfort of being like, you know what, I can maybe still live a comfortable life if I know someone doesn't feel the need to take care of me just because out of love, but because it's their job, it's the state, maybe they'd be less prone to trying to take a route that is going to take them to a more finite solution. So basically what I'm saying is, Jackalope, when you bring up It's a Wonderful Life, the only thing that saved that character from the edge was like this existential, beautiful fantasy experience, which isn't covered under most health insurance policies. So people need to be able
Yeah.
to have access to basic stuff in order to be able to make these kinds of decisions without there being any kind of like stipulation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally took divine intervention in that movie. I think there are maybe some better solutions to our problem. Hopefully better solutions than waiting for an angel to come down and better our situation.
Is
Well,
it
that
PPO or
happens.
HMO? That's what it depends on.
That happens a lot with just autistic people in general. Sometimes when you tell somebody you're autistic, they say, "Oh, well, you don't look like Rain Man. You can't do calculus." So people already have these preconceived ideas, and that's the same thing when it comes to quote unquote saving somebody from suicide. They don't have these miracles that will just all of a sudden change their life and make everything okay all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if we had access to these things, and one thing I wanted to bring up was that if somebody on a mental health aspect, if somebody is going to the length of going to getting physician assisted suicide, they have already gone through so many hurdles, and maybe even this might even be a way for them to get the help that they need to not want to die anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they go seek out physician assisted suicide, then maybe they will talk to somebody who can give them access to the mental health help that they need. Possibly. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that and I think this got mentioned earlier a little bit, but when it comes to depression, a lot of people will talk about how there's a lot of undiagnosed depression among terminal patients or patients who are suffering mentally from PTSD or etc. And I think this quote that I found from David Pollock, MD from the Oregon Health and Science University School of Medicine, does a pretty good job of kind of differentiating these two things. A growing body of evidence clearly distinguishes the characteristics of persons who commit suicide resulting from mental illness from those of terminally ill persons who request medical aid in dying. These differences include the type and severity of psychological symptoms, degree of despair, reasons for wishing to end one's life, communicativeness regarding their wishes and fears, degree of personal isolation, openness about the wish and intended method to end one's life, and the impact on the person's family or support system following the person's death. So there, I think it can be tempting to conflate depression and grieving with people who want to end their own lives, voluntarily via physician facilitated death. But we need to be careful and make sure we're not doing that.
If you want to go, Lord Fruitus, were you raising your hand there?
There was a question in chat about difference between Trump and Biden on the subject, and I did a quick Google search and landed on a discourse by Senator Joseph Biden on assisted suicide and the Pain Relief Promotion Act from April 27th, 2000. Mr. Chairman, I want to say a few words about the Pain Relief Promotion Act, a bill which I am proud to support. This bill does two important things. It makes clear that prescribing pain medication, even when it may increase the risk of death, is a legitimate medical purpose under the Controlled Substance Act, and it makes clear that prescribing medication for the purpose of assisting suicide is not. Now, truth in advertising here, I am opposed to legalizing physician-assisted suicide in this country, period.
Great.
Oh,
That's
there
a
we
one to
go.
bring up. Yeah, I think now might be a good time to actually kind of move a little more towards closing arguments on this topic. And I know Doc had a question he wanted to bring up to pose to you, but maybe start racking your brain a little bit, and we'll go one by one with closing arguments. But do you want to bring up that question, Doc?
Yeah, sure. And Fright Juice, sorry about that. Can you please just message a link to the mod, and then the mod will post it. That's just how. Yeah. That's the only reason why I got deleted. Yeah, you can put in debate sources, and I'll repost it for you too.
I did that.
Oh,
Yeah,
got it. Sorry about that, Fright Juice.
No problem.
So this is Fright Juice's source. But yeah, I would one thing that was so beautiful, I think, about our first debate ever was how everyone of all opposing different viewpoints all had a little discussion in the last part of the debate, and we all came together actually with a solution. And I'd like to do the same thing here. I'd like to ask all of you panelists, what's the most ideal way then, given the discussion we've had so far, to legally or politically implement this to cover everything that Seb's brought up, or Fright Juice brought up, or we all brought up to each other as very relevant, very well supported concerns that exist. And if anyone wants to start out, feel free to.
All right.
And Proletariat, I got you next.
Step 1,
Capitalism.
end capitalism. Step 2, Medicare for all. Let's decommodify healthcare, mental health care. Step 3, make sure that we have a tested system that minimizes the amount of harm done, so that we can make sure that the people who are getting this have exhausted all of their other options first, if possible. And step 4, accurately portray this as a society, right? I think a lot of us tend to and us, not people on the panel, but human beings, tend to simplify things down when this. I feel like almost this is one of the more complicated topics you could have, right? It's fraught with moral and ethical dilemmas, and I'm sure you can make an infinite number of Star Trek episodes about this very topic, okay? But
I'm sure there are.
At the end of the day, we need to basically sit down and we need to have a system, because there's clearly a lot of people out there who are in need of this kind of option, and we need to do right by those people, as well as people who might have other means to live a better and healthier and happier life.
Before Proletariat goes, I just want to confirm the end goal, as far as, would that be a federal law for this? I mean, obviously you had a few steps that might dismantle a little bit more than just our legal legislative system, but is that what you're envisioning as far as to get this? It would be a federal law?
Yeah,
legalizing this?
Yeah, I think that a federal law that kind of establishes like mandatory practices and like make sure that there's some like formal oversight of it to make sure their abuse is kept to a minimum. I think that that would be perfectly fine, given the systems we have now. But to kind of address the other concerns that were brought up by the panel, I think minimizing the coercive elements that could be possibly going into this and factoring into people's decisions, I think is absolutely a good and necessary thing that we could and should do.
Great. Yeah. So, Little Poetariat, I know you had raised your hand if you want to build on that.
Yeah, I could really only build because Jackalope basically stole the wind out of my mouth. I was basically gonna say the long answer is communism, anarchy, and the end goal. But obviously, if you want the short, quick answer, that's gonna be a little bit longer. Meaning, basically, just enacting the like you said, a federal law or whatever, just allowing the room for it to happen. Um, and then as long as the doors are open, just like with something like, let's say, DMT research, the reason there's not that much DMT research is because you're not allowed to do it. So the point being is, as soon as we start opening up, right, we can think all we want, and like that quote about Pollock, like if you never make a move, you're never going to draw anything on the medium that you mean to paint on. And if our medium is the entire country, the easiest thing for us to do is just to legalize it, and then from there, slowly but surely, cut all the fat. And that's going to take a little bit of work, and there are going to be some people that fall between the cracks. But I'd rather us work towards a system where we're slowly figuring it out rather than planning it for 100 years, and then there's hundreds of years of people who are going to suffer because of it.
Great. Does anybody else want to? Everyone was pretty much nodding, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Intro.
Okay, I actually have like about 3 or 4 ideas on this one. Number one, education. I think education is important. If we're not educating, and it doesn't matter what issue it is, especially in particular to this one, the more we learn about what this is, the more we can make informed decisions. Secondly, discussions like this. Yeah, it is a complicated topic. There's so many complexities, there's so many directions you can go into. Absolutely. So I think the more we talk about it, that adds to the education. Personal stories. I think personal stories are important. What about those families who have personally dealt with someone who has been terminally ill? What about what about like Comic Girl? We started out with personal stories. That is a story to tell, to let people know what goes into the mind of someone who is thinking about doing something like this. I think those are
And a statistic.
yeah, exactly. And finally, no matter whether you're for or against it, this is something that you can be an activist about. You can, talk to state legislatures if you want to. Talk to, I think the more that you speak out, whether it's pro or against, your voice matters. And they always say you're that one voice for maybe like those 100 or those several people who don't have the voices. So I think the more we do that, the better.
Yeah, those are really, 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 really good points. Does anyone have anything to say? Oh, proletariat, go for it.
I think he was snapping, but if you have more,
I was
okay.
snapping, but I'll put a bow on what you were saying. Programming seems to be something that's a little taboo, but realistically speaking, what you're speaking to is a programming or a deprogramming, whether it be through media or through Twitch discussions or whatever. Basically, we need to understand at least somebody from my perspective, we have the moral, high ground on this one. So just enacting it and then doing the damage control through the culture afterwards is better than putting the culture in the forefront and then hoping we can change someone's mind. People don't have time. We can't wait. So thank you so much for your 4 points. It was super inclusive.
great.
Yeah, thank you.
So Seb's Lord for Righteous. Oh, Seb's, go ahead.
I just wanted to highlight one of the points Angel brought up, that it's telling stories, because that's something I've noticed, and other streamers have actually told me that they've also noticed that telling stories is something that the left sometimes lacks, and we sometimes get too involved with the numbers, with the data, and everything, and we sometimes lost that important thing that the main factor we as humans have is emotion, and through that stories we connect through people. Then we can also always back up with the facts and with the knowledge and with the data, but also never forget that a good story can simply change people's minds and lives in general. So yeah, and again, it was great that uh, Jack and Proletariat mentioned movies because that's my favorite medium, and that's also a great way of using propaganda media to make people think. And yeah, yeah, that.
Thank you, Subs. I love your nodding proletariat. um, so
can I jump in?
oh yeah, go for it, Illumination.
Go for
So
it.
you mentioned movies and TV and all those things. We forget to tell stories. I fact checked someone's little word of note that you can make a Star Trek episode about it. Someone said beyond you while you were talking that I'm sure you can make hundreds. I looked it up.
There are hundreds.
Yeah, so apparently there are a ton of episodes that cover this topic. So in the wiki that I linked is very well versed in the details. There's spoilers obviously in this, but in trigger warning obviously this is covering some heavy topics, but there are some very good pieces of information and storytelling when it comes to this subject. So
That's why we pay him.
Yeah, that's why we pay him the big bucks. Evan, how do you feel about closing arguments?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
oh, go on.
go ahead. No, to finish what you were gonna say.
Oh, just like last couple of sentences from everyone. I feel
Yeah,
like we've really
I think
reached
that's a good
big
idea.
resolution.
Yeah, I think let's go one by one. Maybe like reverse order them the way we started.
Yeah, sure. So Comic
cool.
Girl will be first. And Comic Girl, I hope we did justice to this subject that is, very, very, very important to you. And I'd just like to thank you again for, the bravery to come on and introduce and start a debate with your own personal story.
Thank you, Comic Girl.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's not really easy to be, the suicide girl. But it's something that needs to be done though. Somebody needs to speak up because there are so many of us who have been suffering for so long, and from a mental health aspect, suicide is not something that is just done, and there is a whole process that people don't even understand happen. There's a streamer called Dr. McLive, and he does a YouTube series, and I'll link that in the discussion channel. And he talks about the different steps that it takes to get to the point of actually fulfilling your ideations. And oftentimes it's something that somebody has been thinking about for a long time. And there are so many factors that lead people up to this. Yes. And I want to say all of them lead to environmental issues. Uh, you are a product of your environment, you are a product of your society, and you react off the way other people treat you, just as other people react off the way you treat them. Hence the golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated. But unfortunately, that's not a reality in our societies. And so there are many of us that get left behind. And, the Bush Jr. had that whole, no child left behind. Well, I am a product of his father who left me behind because I didn't have the resources that I needed to grow and flourish just as a human being, let alone somebody who can be a productive member of society and contribute. So I think one of the things that we should take away from this is that, yes, people should have the choice to do what they want to do with their own lives. But if you can't do that in life, then you should at least be able to do that in death. So please, let people die with dignity if they can't at least live with dignity.
Thank you. That was beautifully put, Comic Girl. Um, Proletariat.
Wanted to thank Comic Girl for doing this. I appreciate you. I know it's hard. The perspective is necessary, so you're doing the good work. So thank you. Also, thank you to everybody on the panel for being here tonight and being so kind. And Doc and Evan, thank you so much for having me. Long story short, it's something as simple as if you live in the country and you're just a good old boy or just a good old girl and you're walking and you see someone drive by and hit a deer and the deer is really not doing well, how quick are you to determine the life or death of that deer? Use that urgency for someone who is telling you literally that they're in pain and that they do want to go, and take their word a little bit more seriously than the deer that you didn't even know if they wanted to go and if they were going to be okay. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you again, y'all.
And sorry, take the opportunity to shout yourself out too. Sorry about that. I forgot.
Of course, not a problem. I'm the little proletariat. You can find me on Twitch. We do the midnight stream of consciousness, 12 uh, a.m., p.m. Eastern, midnight Eastern time. So come find us. YouTube, we do fun videos like, Steven Universe, RuPaul, and the need for deprogramming and propaganda. So just check us out on Twitter, Lil Proletariat, like I'm a rapper. And otherwise, yeah, we're around. Thank you so much, guys.
And everyone, as we're shouting out and doing last minute closing thoughts, panelists and people watching right now, please stay on. We have a big announcement to make in terms of the winners. We have deliberated this whole entire time throughout this whole entire debate, and I'd love to announce that. And Sabs, you go next.
Well, first of all, thank you, Comet Girl, for that story. I even wanted to thank you as soon as you finished because I know sometimes telling our own stories it's harder than it seems. But yeah, I appreciate that a lot, and thank you, Doc, for allowing them to tell their stories because sometimes we don't have that audience, that someone. And I hope that helps you as much as it has helped us, Comet. So yeah, thank you to all of you. This was really my first experience in a panel. I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't want to get hit up, and it didn't happen. So I'm happy for that. And yeah, like always be conscious about everyone and everything. Remember that everything is a choice. But again, the system we live is fucked up. So don't burden yourself with if you ever think you make a wrong decision. Then I'm Sebs. I stream here on Twitch, Sebs Dev. We talk about mental health, politics, and again media and that good stuff. So yeah, please check out please check out everyone in this panel because I've checked out some of their content and it's great to be honest.
Thank you, Sebs. Free juice.
All right. In a world where our bodies are commodified and we all suffer from some sort of alienation, we are alienated from our work, our lives, and our death. So it seems entirely logic to try and reclaim some agency with as little that we can maybe become a bit of self-Luddite to some extent. But I sure would hope that we could, like even in my country where the health care system is being dismantled piece by piece under neoliberal governments, I would like to see a return to some sort of care for people in general. So my final message would be, yeah, folks, take care of each other, take care of most of all of yourself. You're worth it in spite of everything that anyone had told you so far. And yeah, have a good night, everyone.
We
Thank
hear
you for
you.
choose. Oh, go on, comment.
I just said we hear you.
Just quickly, I'm Lord Fritos. I make video games, and maybe sometime I'm gonna stream regularly. Come check out my channel if you want to see some bizarre, stupid visual art. So
Yes, please. Anyone DM me with your Twitch channel so I can follow you. Otherwise, I don't have a link because not everybody has their profile in Discord linked up to their Twitch channel because I've already checked. Neurodivergent. Hello.
welcome to the club. I'm a zebra.
Jack.
Yeah, we live in a world where every aspect of our lives is, to some extent, attached to a price tag, and we're left kind of trying to do the best we can in an imperfect system, struggling to get by. Not all of us manage to be able to make that price tag. And I think that if we accept that there are patients for whom death is good, death helps, then if we acknowledge that assisted dying is roughly morally equivalent to pulling the plug on someone's life support, which is common practice, if we accept these things, if we accept that physicians, there are situations in which physicians might help a patient terminate their life and that result in harm mitigation. If we accept these things, then I think that ultimately assisted dying, assisted death is not just a moral position to have, to be in favor of, but I think it is like the most like objectively scientifically reductionist of harm. My words are bad. I've been talking for a couple hours. But yeah, it reduces harm in the world. I think that's good. I think that's a good thing and fundamentally something that we should all be striving for. And I just want to finish with a quote from a woman named Lois Schaefer, who passed away in 2019 after making use of assisted death programs. All I'm asking for is to have some choice over how I die. Portraying me as suicidal is disrespectful and hurtful to me and my loved ones. It adds insult to injury by dismissing all that I have already endured, the failed attempts for a cure, the progressive decline of my physical state, and the anguish which has involved exhaustive reflection and contemplation, leading me to this very personal and intimate decision about my own life and how I would like it to end. And I think that that is fundamentally, it gets at the issue here. If we acknowledge that a patient has the right to allow themselves to die under other circumstances, whether it's from gangrene, whether it's from refusing a ventilator, whether it's from any other thing, I think we also have to accept that a patient should also have the right to dictate when they've had enough. And you know, we don't know what happens after you die. A lot of people claim that they do, and I think that you have a right to choose when you want to figure that out, when you want to go off into that great mystery. So, with that said, thank you so much, Comic Girl 2222. I appreciate that you came onto this panel, that you shared a very intimate part of yourself with all of us. I think that's really important and really
I just
moving.
like that you guys can't see me stimming.
It's all good. But,
Someday.
But thank you.
Yeah.
Jack, that was so beautiful.
You're beautiful.
That was so beautiful, Jack.
Your face is beautiful. No, really.
Thank you.
We'll go to Angel Rider, and before we go to Angel Rider, thank you everyone for just, treating this discussion as seriously as we could, understanding the reason why we need to have this discussion outside of physicians and politicians who discuss it every day, right? This is something, I know a lot of people were sort of afraid of discussing, but I think Comic Girl can agree with me that this was such a beautiful panel, and like we really covered absolutely everything that was important in regards to this subject. We really did, and I'm proud of all of you for that.
And we didn't yell at each other. Yay!
Nope, we didn't.
Don't worry, I'll yell at Doc later.
And yeah, Angel
What
Rider,
happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. Just saying. Just kidding.
Thank God.
Angel Rider, hats off to you. I mean, well, hats off to you also, but also mic off to you.
Yeah, what a way to what a way to start a first panel. And I understand Seb's about that because I wasn't sure what to expect, because I've watched a lot of political panels, and yeah, it was this I learned a lot from everyone, because the way I want to come away from anything, from any panels, is I'm a person that I like to teach, but I also like to learn things from others too. And I really, really, really learned a lot from everyone. So yes, I am Angel Writer. So this is actually going to kind of be, I would say, maybe a bit of a jumping off point, because I've been toying with the idea of doing content on Twitch. I've done content on other platforms before, so I do have some experience there, but Twitch is like a whole different animal that I'm starting to learn about. So, but if you really want to find me in terms of interaction or whatever, I do have a Discord there on my Twitch channel. I have my Discord. Follow me on Twitch. I get pretty active on there. I get pretty, I interact with a lot of other people on there. I also have a couple YouTube channels. There's a panel on YouTube, as I said, that's on Saturday nights, every Saturday nights. I haven't been on there because of the holiday season, and it's called The Breakfast Club. And it's a group that's composed of a few individuals that I've known for quite a long time since interacting on YouTube, and they've become really good friends. And we've been there with each other through this whole pandemic. And I have to say on the topic, I think this is one of those issues you don't really have a foregone conclusion. It's always going to be a morality issue. There's always going to be something with money. It's always going to be economic. And I think what you need to do is just have, there's a respect factor with it. It is emotional. It is something that it's a hard decision, whether you're the person that's going to agree with it, whether you're the person that's thinking through it, whether you're the person that you're having that struggle with it. And I think as long as we show that compassion and show that we're listening, consider, just be there for that person. Just make sure that you have that understanding ear. I mean, it's one thing talking, but there's a lot that'll happen when you're just sitting back and listening. And I think we need to do a little bit more than that. And this is one of those that we need to listen. We need to kind of do that for. And to finally conclude, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. This has been wonderful. This has been beautiful. I really appreciate, Evan for approaching me and asking me. And I wanted an open an invitation. If you have a panel, or if you want to do even a one-on-one, I'm very open to coming on with you and talking about different topics, whether it be vaping or e-cigarettes, women's issues.
Yes. Gonna email you.
Okay, ERA, equal pay. Those are some of my background. North Korea, the Korean Peninsula. I have a lot of experience with that. Just to kind of show what I got. But this was a good training ground. I really appreciate how this was organized. And if there's another topic, let me know. I'll let you know if I can join or not, because I'd like to do this again. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you. And before I go into starting, the little outro and announcing the winners, can we all, like, everyone in chat, everyone in the panel on video cam right now, can we all just give one last supporting round of applause to Comic Girl?
Oh shit! Thank you.
Yeah, bravo.
So I want to add one thing just right at the end, and especially from a mental health aspect, and I want to talk to the people who have had people in their lives that they've cared about who have committed suicide. If I can address them real quick, or if in the future uh, somebody that you love does actually go through their ideations and commit suicide, one thing I want you to know, that it is not your fault. It is not their fault. It is not your fault. Yes, maybe there may have been things that could have been done differently. There's always what ifs. Always. But one of the underlying things when it comes down to people who commit suicide because of depression or mental health issues, much of that comes from society as a whole, not just you, but as a whole. Okay? So don't you ever put that burden. I don't care if somebody even implicates you in their suicide note because, they're, whatever. It is never your fault. In the end, it is their choice, not yours. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one last round of applause, everyone. Please, please. Just show Comic Girl all the support that you can, because Comic Girl is just so transparent and so vulnerable to all of us, and, was risking that vulnerability just so we can have this discussion, just so we can have an anecdotal basis to start off this debate and discussion, and just so we could remind everyone how goddamn important this topic is to discuss. I think we all learned something here, and I think that's amazing. And yeah, so throughout this whole debate, Evan Fonzie, Illumination, and I have been deliberating this whole entire time, and we have decided the winner. And we'll do first, second, and third place. And once again, everyone tuning in from Dylan Burns, this is the second episode of the Rebuttal by Doc and Evan Fonzie. And this is a panel that Evan Fonzie and I started because we wanted to see Twitch debate that is professionally moderated, that is focused more on academic discussion that's treated seriously, that is live fact checked, and the winner is not the person who won, with their argument per se, but the person who won with their arguments and points, most well supported with sources, most intelligently discoursed, and most intelligently discoursed in their response as well to everyone else. So we've deliberated, and the $35 award, in any form that you would like, will go to Riverboat Jack. Good job, Riverboat Jack. And if you didn't speak for the whole entire debate, that last closing point would have still given you first place.
She knocked it out of the park, yo.
Yeah. And
it's like I wanted to say something poignant, but then she was like already on it, yo.
Thank you.
It was great, yeah.
And second place goes to Lord Freichus, and third place goes to Little Proletariat. Also because you came on last minute as a fill-in, and you came on still prepared.
Yeah, coming in with the clutch prep work already done. You watched an entire documentary for this show that you didn't know you'd be on.
Yeah.
Don't give me too much credit. It was an HBO documentary movie, so it was a docudrama, best case scenario, but thank you for the credit anyway.
And, just as is tradition for the rebuttal by Doc and Fonzie, just as I did the intro, I will have my co-host and co-creator, Evan Fonzie, do the outro.
Yeah, I mean, just thanks so much, everybody. Yeah, you all said it. This was a great panel. Even if you weren't named first, second, or third, it was all across the board. Everyone had amazing points, and it wouldn't have been possible without each of the individual people who gave their arguments and gave their points on this panel. And yeah, we're doing this every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Next week, we're still finalizing the topic. I don't want to hint at it because we haven't finalized it yet, but we'll join Doc Midnight's Discord if you're interested in joining the next panel, and we'll announce it there, and we do some vetting there, and we try to make this a very curated panel. We had more than just 6 people, obviously, because we had Proletariat coming in the last minute, but more than 6 people who wanted to be on this, but we thought these diverse perspectives and diverse points of view would lead to the most productive and thought-provoking conversation. So thank you so much to everybody. Thanks to everybody who tuned in on Twitch. And yeah, follow all these people because they're grinding, and we're making some good content here. So yeah, anything else you want to add there, Doc?
I don't, but Lumination does.
Great.
So they're letting me out the basement to give you the to give you this disclaimer. I want to preface this. This is a very close issue to my heart, and death affects us all in different ways. So I got a joke that usually cheers me up, and I've used 4 people, and it's maybe it's me, maybe it's Maybelline. You're worth it too type of mentality. You are worth it. So if you are feeling suicidal, thinking about hurting yourself, or concerned about someone you know, someone you care about, or someone you don't even know, and you just want to make sure they stay out of danger, prevent them from hurting themselves, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, please. 1-800-273 TALK. That's 8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, staffed by certified crisis response professionals. Just please help people, be kind, that's free, and make sure that everyone makes it tomorrow.
Thank you, Illumination.
Thank you.
Great. Thank
Yes.
you.
And hey, I'm Doc Midnight, everyone. I'm Twitch's resident COVID doctor and science educator and medical educator, and for some reason I started a debate panel, but I did with Evan Fonzie. And if you like what I do on Twitch, I usually am answering medical questions, giving COVID updates to people, talking to different Twitch streamers to educate their communities, and as well as holding this debate panel every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern with Evan Fonzie. And hey, Evan Fonzie, my amazing co-host, shout yourself out, please. And everyone, please sub and follow to Evan Fonzie, please.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and obviously same to Doc. He deserves all the support for the work he puts in. But yeah, I do stream as well. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I started streaming on Twitch this year. With pandemic, can't really do stand-up, so we talk politics, but we talk a lot of stuff, pop culture. We just have fun, and obviously I have a leftist perspective, but I like to talk about whatever. So come check us out, Evan Fonzie, and yeah, I mean I do have a degree in business management economics, so I bring in a little bit of an academic perspective if I need to. I'm an accountant during the day. It's my day job, so I bring in a lot of points of view, but we just like to have fun. So come hang out, and we love having new people in the community, so we hope to see you.
Thank you so much, Evan, and I'd just like to give a last thank you, everyone, the panelists, Evan, Illumination. Thank you for coming on, everyone. Thank you for treating this discussion very, very seriously, as you should. And thank you, everyone in chat, for being very civil. And thank you, everyone in chat, for your amazing questions.
Thank you, chat.
Yeah, thank you, chat.
And thank you for all the support. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you for all the support in my community. And everyone, please shoot some subs and follows to Evan Fonzie as well. Evan, actually, if you wouldn't mind just staying on for like 5-10 minutes, I'd like to raid into you.
I'm probably gonna. All right. Well, I guess I'm about to get off, but I guess I'll just, if you want to raid to me, I'll just raid to somebody else right after. But
you guys can hit up Jack. I think she'll be on for a while. Just saying.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, if you want to just raid into Jack, that's fine with me. I appreciate that though, Doc. I just got a couple things to do at home.
Yeah,
I'd
for sure.
appreciate
I
that too, because
understand.
I'm gonna go hang out with her.
Great. Yeah, definitely check out Riverboat Jack as well.
Yeah, and as soon as Evan and I figure out the topic, we will discuss it. We will announce it all over Twitter. We will announce it all over Discord. Anyone who is interested in participating, feel free to join my Discord and post a little introduction as soon as we announce the topic. But this is the Rebuttal, episode 2. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Jack, I will raid into you, and Evan.
Cool.
I love you, man. Thank you so much.
Much love, man. Yeah, much love to everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
We'll see you next time.
You guys did
Yeah, see you next time.
guys did such a good job moderating this panel and fact checking. Just
Yes.
want to say major props. That's not an easy
Yes.
job to do.
Shout out to
Major props
Illumination.
to
on the
Illumination.
fact check.